Okay. Welcome, everyone. We're getting started. You guys ready to rock and roll? Woo! Wake up, Tasum. Get your coffee, get your boon, get your shahi. Let's get this started. EriStars. I already said that earlier. We're going to get started. We have a wonderful agenda. I saw the agenda. It's like we got a whole, show for you guys, for you young folk, and then for the parents as well. Again, as I said earlier, they're going to be super proud of you just for being here, because I invited some of my family members, and they just stayed home. They were like, I'm too tired, but you guys are here.
Hold on.
Give you guys self the credit. Let's clap it up for you guys. Let's go. Woo! Give it up for them, man. These young folks. Pat yourself on the back. There you go. Show some love. All right. So the first one we have some speakers for you guys. And the first speaker we have is our wonderful Jonas Michael. He is a principal at Amos Middle School, 2021 Educator of Character Award recipient. So he's big time. Mr. Jonas Michael is currently he has been the principal since January 2019, and he has a Bachelor of Arts degree in social work from Salisbury University. So if anybody's interested in Salisbury University, he's the guy to talk to. And also so Bachelor of Arts degree in social work with Salisbury University, and arts in sociology from the University of Maryland Eastern Shore. So if those colleges, your interest, he's your guy to talk to. He also has a Master's of Education in Educational Leadership and Policy Studies from Iowa State University. So even after you graduate college, you got to continue to advance your education. Also, he's as well a professional administrator licensed from ISU. He's in the final stages of his doctorate degree. Man, this guy is smart. Woo! He is smart. So he's a smart guy, and so he has experience in therapists and Lutheran services in Iowa. So, is Jonas Michael ready? He's ready to rock and roll.
He's a person who gives himself to everyone and everything so that we can become our best selves.
Respect is the first word that comes to mind when I think about Jonas and his work as a leader.
Caring and respect and citizenship are really big deals to the way he chooses to lead.
Before I worked with him, I knew of him from the district when he held a previous position here, and I knew he was very well liked in the district. Everyone really respected him a lot.
Upon completing my master's degree, I actually received a job in the Ames Community School District, and I stayed for 10 years, working my way up from a school counselor all the way up to the Director of Student Services.
He's not afraid to have those conversations that maybe others would be nervous or uncomfortable to talk about.
What I saw was an alarming trend in our district, that the graduation rates of Black students was going down, and it was going down really quick. So at the time that I pulled the data, 53% of our Black students were graduating. We quickly put systems in place and processes in place to identify students who are at risk of dropping out, and doing so much earlier. When I left to go back to Maryland that year, when the data was reported, so the 2017 school year, the graduation rate for Black students was 95%.
There were some very clear challenges that were going on in the school, not only related to academic outcomes, but related to kind of climate, school environment. And we knew that Principal Michael was such a really strong team builder and someone who could really help generate a culture that would provide and support academic success, that he was the perfect person to bring into the middle school at this time.
I remember talking to my father, and he had said to me, "What are your future goals?" And I said, "One day to be a principal." And he said, "Well, the opportunity has presented itself to you."
I don't truly believe that I had experienced excellent leadership until I worked with Jonas.
He's really created a very family-oriented feel
sometimes we can be like an ocean with a storm, right? The waves are going to be really rocky, but Jonas is the anchor for us.
He's listening to you specifically. He's saying, what do you have to say? What voices are we not hearing? He wants to understand them because he wants us all to be lifted up.
He is a role model for many Black and brown students who live in Ames, who rarely see someone who looks like them in such an important leadership position.
We're all so proud of you. I really appreciate being your colleague in this process and getting to work alongside of you.
Jonas, I'm so proud of you, and I love you. You're an amazing, amazing person.
Congratulations, my friend and my colleague. I hope you know that your labor is not in vain.
When a small group of committed people, and that small group can be one person, they are indeed able to be change agents for our world. And so I would just encourage people to go out and just really fight for what's right, and just care for one another.
Good morning to everyone. I did see the introduction video that you all showed for my bio. That was an award that I won for the state of Iowa for being the Iowa Educator of Character. And I just felt like when I was listening to people say my name, they a bit Americanized it, right? And so I felt like I need to show my credibility to your parents out there that I am actually Habeshan. I speak a little bit of Tigrinya, so I'm gonna start off greeting them. Salam, kamahadirkum dahanda. I can't hear you all, I can't see you, so I don't know if you all are engaged with this or not, but I'm gonna keep this moving because I know you all are on a very tight timeline. For those of you that are students, first off, my heart is overwhelmed knowing that our community is pulling you all together to be able to prepare you for the next steps of your life. If you think that high school is difficult, let me assure you the challenges of college and things that happen after college are much more difficult, but it's so rewarding for all of you. And we'll talk a little bit about that today. Give me a second as I try to share my screen here. So I'm going to talk about a little bit about why education matters. So just to kind of give you a preview of how this is going to go, I really appreciating hearing the gentleman talk about you all asking questions at the end. So I'm actually going to speed through this a little bit because I think what's most important is that our students, our youth are able to ask the questions that are most important to them because ultimately this day is about you all. You heard a little bit about in the video about graduation rates. So before I became a principal, I was the director of student services. And one of the things that I primarily focused on was on dropout prevention. So making sure that students don't drop out of high school so that they can experience what life has for them post high school. In the district that I was working at the time, the graduation rates for Black students was about 53% when I took on this position. And so of course that was really difficult for me to grapple with, and it was challenging for me to hear those statistics because the students that were not graduating were students that look like me, students that look like you, right? And I'll save a little bit of that to the end. So let's talk about the importance. First off, my name is Jonas. I'm Eritrean. I was born in Khartoum, Sudan. My parents came here when I was about 2 years old, so 37 years ago. So I have a unique perspective in that I understand what it's like to be sitting in your shoes. Even though I'm an older person, I experience the exact same things that you all are experiencing now, right? So I remember asking my parents if I can go to my friend's house, and their response would be, no, read a book, right? So they'll tell me, stop playing video games, you need to read, and you need to focus, you need to read. Why do you got B's? You need to get all A's, right? Like all of those things. You need to be a doctor, lawyer, engineer, you need to read. Constantly emphasizing this importance of education. And I think at that time, it felt like they were pestering me. And I'm sure that you all are like, yeah, I get it, mom, dad, I get it. We got to do good in school. And it's hard for me at that time to understand why they kept preaching that. Just like many of you, my parents worked in jobs that require hard labor. They focused on trying to make sure that their children had the very best, and they knew that education was the gateway to get to break the cycle of poverty. They wanted the best for their kids, So they really emphasize getting good grades, going to school. And of course, as an educator, as a principal myself, I would concur, like education is super important. So let's talk about, I'm gonna kind of start negative, then I'm gonna go positive, and then we're gonna go to critical mode for a moment, okay? So what is the cost of not going to school? So high school dropouts make about $20,000 a year. If you graduate from high school, you make about $30,000 a year. If you have a bachelor's degree, you make a little over $50,000 a year. And for those of you who have advanced degrees, so master's degrees, doctorate degrees, make nearly $70,000. And of course, all master's degrees, all bachelor's degrees are not the same. So someone who gets a master's degree in, let's say, engineering, on average will make more money than someone who gets a master's degree in education. So these are just averages. And so you can see just off the top, from a cost perspective, the benefits of getting an education. But for some people, they would say, you know what, this is not about the money. So why would I need to go to college? Why do I need to do well in school? So let's look at the other side of it. So those who drop out of high school are 80%. So 80% of our incarcerated population in the United States are filled with high school dropouts. And this is the part that's most alarming. You are 63 times more likely to be incarcerated if you don't go to college. If you don't go to college, you are 63 times more likely to be incarcerated. And then the life expectancy. So female students who drop out of high school live on average 10.5 years fewer than those who graduate from high school. And then for males, it's even more staggering. They live 13 years fewer. And so people will say, well, I don't understand how life expectancy is connected to high school graduation, college graduation. And we'll get there in a moment. So let's talk about the flip side. So now we're going to move quickly into the positive, the importance of higher education. So of course, there's an economic benefit. We talked about the difference in salaries between people who graduate from high school and those who graduate from college. So let's talk about health. Of course, when you have a good paying job, what do? You get benefits, you get health insurance. Think about the number of people in our country that do not have health insurance. So your life expectancy is longer because when you have diseases or illness, you're able to get proper care. Plus, think about the stress that is involved when you are constantly having to think about your finances, how to survive from month to month. And then the one thing that I would tell you, high school was pretty easy for me, if I'm going to be honest with you. I graduated National Honor Society. I had a full academic scholarship to college. When I went to get my master's degree, again, I had a full academic scholarship. It wasn't until I got into my doctorate degree that I really understood how much discipline it takes to get through very rigorous programming. Your dissertation, which is at the final stage where I'm at, requires you to do a lot of research. And at the end of it, your dissertation is about 200 pages of work, right? Like, it's a huge paper. Back in the day, I remember when I used to have to do 20-page reports, and I used to think, man, who's going to be able to write 20 pages? And now I got about a 200-page paper that I need to write in order to get my doctorate degree. But the discipline that comes with it enables me to have great problem-solving skills, critical thinking, being able to understand complex directions. Those are things that you build by going to school. Of course, you have better communication. Those who are educated likely have better written and oral communication. And those are things that you need in every job, right? Even if you're working at McDonald's, you need to be able to communicate appropriately. And those who are in higher positions have to be able to communicate effectively. And I think there's a difference between communicating effectively and just being able to communicate. You have to be able to get your message across in a way that's going to stick with people and that it's going to be very clear and understanding. And of course, when I started off college, I thought I was going to be a dentist. I started off pre-biology, and I made a couple of changes along the way, and that's okay. That's the average student changes their major 3 to 4 times while they're in college. But it helps you to realize what is your true passion. And so for me, I realized that I wanted to go into the field of education my senior year of college. And so I went through life thinking I wanted to be a therapist. And it wasn't until I went into my master's degree that I actually specialized in education. So the further you get in education, the more likely you're able to find your passion and actually be able to follow that path. So I apologize for going super fast. I know we're on a time crunch, but I wanted to end with this. And really, this is for the parents, right? We all hear this message over and over again. Go to school, do well, get into college, and you're on your way to a good job and a happy life. You put in the work and you'll be rewarded. That's the promise of education. I'm an educator. I believe that that is true for most people. So I want to get critical for a moment. That is the broken promise of education. So I don't know if you saw in my introduction slide, and then if you look at my bio, I'm a social justice advocate. I believe in anti-racist education and curriculum. The truth is, if we really stop and pause for a moment, the educational system, when it was first created, was not designed for people that look like me and you, all right? And so when I say look like me and you, I'm talking about Black folks. Our system, I hate to break it to you, parents, don't be mad. I definitely believe we need to have our students go to college and further their education. But I have to make sure that people understand we have to work twice as hard to get the same thing as our white peers. The system is broken. It is inherently racist. When it first was created, the educational system, it was created for people that don't look like us. It was actually created as a casting system. The United States needed to have a workforce, and schools were used to divide people into different career paths. You need, in our country, we need people to work at McDonald's, right? We need people to work at fast food restaurants. Look at this pandemic, right? There's a shortage of labor, and oftentimes it's in low-paying jobs. So our system was designed to really segregate people and really advantage certain people over others, and that's white folks. So as an educator myself, not only am I working in the system, I'm working to fix the system. So I have double the work to do. And as students, you too have double the work to do. You have to work twice as hard to get the same thing as your neighbors that look different from you. You have to work twice as hard to get the same acknowledgement as your white peers. The system isn't created for people that look like us. And so the outcome of all of this is that you cannot slack off. You have to work harder to be able to get the very best you can in your future. I want to pause for a moment because I want to be able to answer questions. I think what's most important than me sitting up here telling you the importance of education is getting to hear from you all as students about what are your biggest barriers, or what are the questions that you are most wanting to have answered as you prepare for the next stages of your life.
All right, my name is Amir. Can you hear me? All right, my question is, well, the first one, if you don't know what you want to do like your senior year, you think it's too late?
If you're talking about senior year of high school,
Yeah.
no. So I came in, like I said, I'm gonna take my headphones off because of the feedback. I came to high school, or I went into college thinking I wanted to be a dentist. And so I started off my first school year doing biology. And then at the end of that, I changed to sociology and social work. I was actually working on both my bachelor's degrees at the same time because I wanted to get into the helping profession. Once I got to my senior year for my social work degree, I decided to go into the school system to see if I wanted to be a school social worker. And I fell in love with the education system. So at the end of that, I went on to get my master's degree in education so that I can work in the school system. So for me, I actually didn't know what I wanted to do into my senior year of college. So you're actually just fine if you're a senior in high school and you don't know what you want to do. When you go to college, your first 2 years, to be quite honest with you, most of your courses look the same as everybody else. You're still in what's considered a liberal arts education. So you're still getting your, your foundational English courses, your math courses, your science courses, things that everybody, no matter what their major is, need to get. So you have time to figure it out, even when you go to college.
Okay, do you have another question? Do you guys have any questions? Okay. All right, thank you. Give it up for, what was your name again? Amir? Amir, give it up for Amir. Okay. Good job, Amir. All right, so this table, choose one representative. Okay, so they picked you. Oh, there you go. The rest of y'all got to wash the dishes afterwards. Okay. Just tell them your name, and then you can go ahead and ask your question. Go ahead.
My name is Senai.
Okay.
The first question is, what are the key steps to finding success in the things you do?
Man, that's a tough one. Key success to finding things. So, so first off, when you think about what you want to do, it takes time. You're not going to know right away. One of the things that's unique about colleges is that it's really the last time you receive a liberal arts education. So it actually, they're still preparing you to help decide what you want to do when you grow up. So you're still taking a wide range of courses in college. And as you get further in your studies, you quickly realize, I bet you right now, if I ask how many of you love math, there's going to be a huge portion of you that are going to say no, right? How many of you like science? And of course, our parents are like, math, science, math, science. But you quickly start to eliminate the things that you're not passionate about. And so I started off as a biology major because I thought I wanted to be a dentist, but I hated science. It wasn't something for me. And so I was able, through a process of elimination, for me, it was through a process of elimination that I was able to find my passion. I knew I wanted to help people. I just wasn't quite sure how I was going to do that until I was able to experience that setting in a school setting my senior year of high school. So sometimes you just kind of have to branch out, network, do internships, do job shadowing, visit folks, talk to folks until you get to an area that you think that you're going to be really passionate about. It just takes time. It's trial and error, just like everything else in life. You're just going to have to try a few things here and there until you find something that you like.
Do you have any other questions? You got 2 more questions? Yeah, you got something written there. I can see the little writing, little scribbles.
When did you realize you wanted to become a principal and help Black students?
What's your name?
Senai.
Senai. I appreciate that question. So when I was director of student services, by the time the data got to me about knowing, well, first off, when I was getting my master's degree, I had a optimistic view of education. It wasn't until I was getting my master's degree that I realized that the system was rigged, that the system wasn't here for people that look like us. So when I was working in the system, I saw firsthand how racist the system was. I saw firsthand how the system didn't care about people that look like me. And so it was through that negative experience. I mean, teachers were speaking in coded language. Administrators were suspending kids just to get them out of their school. There were tons of things that were happening that really impacted the ability for Black and brown students to be successful. So it was through my own experience working in the system that I realized that if I'm not the one fighting for them, then who is? Also, when I was in high school, you all have school counselors, guidance counselors is maybe what you call them. At the time, that's what we called them. You meet with your counselor and they start to talk to you about, what do you want to do post high school? And my counselor kept saying, hey, community college is a good option. And I'm thinking, why are we talking about community college? Like, I'm an excellent student. I eventually got a full academic scholarship to college. And it wasn't until later on that I realized he was part of the system. He was a white male deciding my outcome without even getting to know me, right? It seemed very covert initially, but what I realized is that this is actually happening across the country, and my system was no different. And so I decided that I wanted to be a principal because I wanted to be right there with the students, and I would have more authority and power to challenge teachers who are engaging in activities and practices that are intentionally meant to marginalize us as students. And so that was where my passion came from and my desire to want to be a principal. It's a tough job. You know, I have 1,150 students in my building. I have 130 staff members. And there's only 4 Black educators, myself included, in that entire building. And so I am constantly pressing against the system to make sure that the 10% of Black students and the 8% of Hispanic students have a fair shot.
Okay, all right, let's give it up for Sinai. And we got Jonas.
I hear
Jonas,
that you all are pressed for time, so I don't want to take too much more time up for you all, but it's been a pleasure talking to all of you. I wish I could see your faces. I wish I could be there in person with you all, but I'm so proud of you all. We are a family, we're extended family. So if you all need anything, please email me. You can connect with Helen and she can give you my contact information via email. But your success is my success. So even though that you all are in Maryland, know that you have an advocate for you all. Parents, if you have questions and you want to get a hold of me, again, just connect with Helen. She'll give you my contact information. I'd be more than honored to support you and work alongside you to help help your children experience success. So thank you so much, everyone.
More time for Mr. Michael. All right, so right now we're gonna go to our next speaker. Thank you so much, Mr. Michael. As he said, you gotta work twice as hard to, across the board, to go against the majority. And just remember that. I know some of you guys had questions. You can save it and we will contact Jonas Michael, or we'll give the contact information for you. We have our next speaker. His name is Anthony Acevedo. He's a PhD in human performance, specializing in sports nutrition. And he's an adjunct professor at Grand Canyon University. So he's going to get started in a little bit. While we get started, think of questions for him as well. Again, he is right here, actually. He's got a nice little background over here. He's a nutritionist. He's all healthy. Look like he just worked out right now. You know, so he's good to go. Can you hear us, Tony?
Oh, yeah, I hear you just great.
Wonderful. We can hear you, too. You don't have any feedback or anything?
Nope, I hear you good. Perfect.
Okay, all right. Let's give it up one more time for Mr. Acevedo. All right. Woo, woo.
All right, guys. Well, so good to meet you guys. And, like Jonas said, I wish I could be there as well, but I'm in sunny Phoenix, Arizona. I had to get out of Maryland. The cold weather just wore on me. You know how it goes. So anyway, I completely agree with what Jonas has said. A lot of my motivation was due to a lot of the similarities. I grew up in Brooklyn. I'm Puerto Rican. So it was really rough in the 80s, rough in the 90s. And I spent 4 years in the United States Coast Guard when I was 17 to 21. And one of the first things that I recognized was, like, just as Jonas said, I was like, man, I'm going to have to work twice as hard to be better or be above the system. And there's legitimacy to that. So a little bit of background on me. I have 2 master's degrees. I started a PhD in nutritional biochemistry at UMBC. I enjoyed it, but I got bored of being in the lab and just working with cells. It just kind of gets old. I love biochemistry by all means. So as Jonas didn't like it, I love it. But I went to Townsend University. I did an internship there. My ultimate goal was to be a professor, which I am now currently. I spent 20 years in the fitness industry. I owned a bunch of gyms. So I finally just transitioned from that aspect into the academia world. And I just finishing up a PhD right now in human performance. I love nutrition. I love everything about it. I love the aspects of it. So what I noticed, though, for me, growing up the way I did in Brooklyn and growing up through the system, essentially, that fitness, nutrition, and just being healthy and conscious about being healthy changed everything, because it took my platform and it gave me a focus. And the reality is, if you think a lot about what the alternative method is. So when I grew up in Brooklyn, my stepdad sat me down and he said, here, these are your 2 routes. you're either, and I'm going to be legitimate with you guys, you're either going to go sell drugs with your friends or you're going to go into the military. Because at the time I was terrible at school. I just didn't care. So I was like, oh, well, I'm going to go in the military. I heard the Coast Guard was really cool. And at the time, you know, it was right before 9/11. So it was exciting. So I did that and I made my decision and I don't look back. And I made school almost like a second job for me because I absolutely love it. And the reality is if you're healthy and you're health conscious and you care about nutrition, you're not going to do drugs. You're not going to drink. You're not going to excessively go out all the time and eat and do other things. Not saying that you shouldn't in a small amounts, but it changes your mind frame and you're focused. Same thing with being an athlete. Majority of my clients, I help them transition into the collegiate level. And I worked with a ton of pros. I've worked with Olympic athletes before. I worked with a lot of women soccer players who are currently in the Olympics. So with that mind frame, you hold yourself to a higher standard. And when you hold yourself to a higher standard, you're just a better person. And that's the cool thing about, you know, where we're at as me being brown and you guys being black. Like you have to, because you have to be a little bit better. You have to try a little bit harder. And there's nothing wrong with that because hard work pays off. At some point in time, hard work pays off. And I mean, me personally and Jonas, and I'm sure a lot of these other speakers and a lot of people that are around you, we're proven methods of it. It can happen. So other than that, there's a few things I wanted to talk about. So the school I currently teach at, Grand Canyon University, is a D1 school. The women's soccer team, and I just relevant with soccer because I know you guys love soccer as much as I do. They just made it to the national, so they will go to the NCAA tournament. The men's just won last night, so they have one more game, and then they're going to go to the NCAA tournament. So as we're not a huge school and we're a Christian school, but we take our sports very seriously. So my role is I teach in the exercise science department, I teach in the nutrition department, as well as I head one of the research departments. So we take a couple studies I'm going to talk about. We take a lot of the athletes. I go and I do atherosclerotic testing. I do VO2 max testing. I analyze nutrition. I do not write them meal plans because they do have their own specific sports nutritionists for their teams, but I do give them advice on, you know, what's necessary based off of some of the statistical aspects that I do see when I do some of the readings. So the first thing I'm going to ask you, and the first thing I'm going to tell you guys is one, and I see this a lot because one of the big reasons why I wanted to go to GCU was because there was a huge Hispanic and primarily Mexican culture that's there. So it's white and Hispanic. There's very few Black people there. But for me, you know, I wanted to help the Hispanic community. And the one thing I tell students all the time is do not change who you are. Like you guys in your culture, and I looked it up and I have had, not exactly the same, but I've had Ethiopian clients and your food is delicious. It's amazing, but do not change your culture. But one of the bigger issues is, and especially for the Hispanic culture coming into universities is, and I've seen this at Townsend, I've seen it at UMBC and stuff like that, is the Western diet is the worst diet, and hands down, the literature is super prevalent. It is a terrible diet. It's delicious, but it's terrible. So what I tell students at the same aspect is don't lose who you are, because as a culture, like me, I still eat arroz con pollo at least probably maybe once or twice a week because that's what I grew up on. I love it. But I also have a conscious aspect of it to where it's like, okay, I know that I need a continuously aspect of eating healthy foods. I have really good accumulation of healthy proteins, good fats, and a good amount of carbohydrates. I don't eat a lot of sugar. I don't drink a lot of sodas or anything like that because I have to make sure this is always prime time. So one of the bigger studies that I have done and that I've been a part of is looking at cognitive function, which disoriented eating. So what we did is we took students, just like you guys are going to be in university, and especially more, I like to focus more on the freshmen because when you're transitioning from high school to university, guess what? There's no parents there making your food. There's no parents buying your food. You might have, you know, a commissary aspect to it, but at the same time is you got free range to eat whatever you want, which is a gift and a curse because as it's good, it's bad because then you start seeing all these aspects. Like on university, we have Chick-fil-A, Pita Pit, Burger King, McDonald's, Jamba Juice. I mean, everything you could think of, we have it on campus. Like it's at your fingertips. So which is enticing. And students tend to go for the easier route because they're like, oh, I have all this work to do. I'm super stressed. I'm just going to eat whatever this is. But in the study that we found is if you don't exercise, if you don't control or just pay attention to your diet. And when I tell you this, I'm very serious in the sense of where I push against the people that want to log their food and overconsume that, and it doesn't have to be that complicated. I just want you to be conscious about understanding what's healthy and what's not. So what that study found is if you don't exercise and you're not healthy, your grades are twofold worse in a sense of, so if you're normally a B student, the probability of you passing the class is a lot less. And if you're normally an A student, you're probably going to get C's. And just like myself and Jonas and a lot of the other educators here, like having a bachelor's degree is great. And by far, I'm so happy that I have one. But nowadays, the way society is and the position that we're put into, you have to have a master's. And a lot of the times you have to have a terminal degree. You have to have a PhD or doctorate or some aspect like that, because that's what we need in society to level up essentially. So what I can tell you is that nutrition plays a role in how your brain works. And in any situation, you always want this on prime time, ready to fire off, because if you're not cognitively intuitive, you're behind a step. And if you're in an interview or if you're having a talk like today, the one thing you don't want to do is be behind the curve. And I'm sure you guys have experiences where you kind of feel a little bit mental sluggishness, or you feel like you're stumbling on words. You don't want that. You want to be in tune with everything that you're doing. Now, that's just your normal student. And to me, I care about academia more than I care about sports, because in the grand scheme of things, this is going to be with you for the rest of your life. Your sports could be detrimental to injury or something else. And I try not to focus on that as much as I love football or I love soccer. I try not to focus on that. But if you're an athlete and you go to the collegiate level to play, believe me, if you play on the club team or you play in high school, whatever it is, levels here. You get to college, especially at D1 school, levels here, and you have to step your game up. And I tell you, there are some gifted athletes, and there's some, believe me, I come across with some Olympians who they'll eat Chick-fil-A once a day and they play great, but they'll never, they were still had a little bit more in them. And with us who actually have to really try, you need that nutritional aspect there because it's extremely important. So what I would tell you is, if you're an athlete, looking you in the eye, you have to treat yourself as such. If you know that you struggle a little bit more in school, like I did, I knew that I had to make sure everything was in place. I made sure I exercised, I made sure my nutrition is placed, and I made sure I slept sufficiently. So I stopped that whole partying thing and thinking about going out. As soon as I got out of the military, it wasn't even a thing anymore. So like 21, 22 years old, it was done, because what I cared about to me was being successful. And that's where your mind has to go, because if you're conscious about what you do during your day, as far as exercise and nutrition goes, a lot of that stuff doesn't make a difference anymore. And as I know, with you guys being younger, it's hard to kind of generate that concept. But if you could kind of grasp this concept a little bit earlier, I will promise you it will pay you dividends by the time you get older. I promise you that. So other than that, I wrote a couple things I want to make sure that you understand. So one of the studies that I did currently at GCU were looking at food options, because a lot of the feedback that I got was, oh, Tony, there's no healthy food options. But there's always healthy food options. You just have to be cautious and be concerning about what those options are. If you go to Chick-fil-A, go get grilled, grab a salad, put the grilled chicken on the salad. Yeah, it's not as exciting as their waffle fries or their fried chicken burger or whatever you're going to get. But the reality is you got to remember, you're better than that. That one-time meal is giving you satiation for a very short period of time. Your mind and your actions and the way you perform, that's who you are. That's who people will remember you by. No one's going to remember you by you eating a Chick-fil-A sandwich, but they're going to remember how you played in that game. And they will remember what aspect you left out, as far as, like, especially for me being professor, I will remember those students who gave it care and who performed well in class. I won't remember those who didn't show up or who were sloppy or didn't care. So you have to think about who you are and who's your legacy. Who do you want to be? What footprint do you want to be in this world? Also going into thinking about your parents and now who you are, and at the time that you might be parents, what message are you going to send your kids? Like it's just a perpetual cycle, and it's important. So understanding that is very important. Understanding, I'm a very big proprietor on breakfast. I like breakfast, two primary reasons. One, it sets neurological and hormonal tone, which is extremely important for your day. And it helps with satiation aspects. So if you're one of those people that are like, oh, I don't need breakfast, I don't eat until 12, 1 o'clock, try to be a little bit different, because as the science is a little bit conflicting in relevancy to weight loss, it is not conflicting when it comes to your brain activity. So try to be a little bit better at eating breakfast. And when I say breakfast, I'm not saying pancakes or Eggos or waffles or any of that. I'm saying good hearty proteins, ideally eggs. They're a very, very nutritious source of a ton of nutrients as well as proteins. And then, you know, a lot of vegetables. Vegetables are extremely important, you know, without getting into the biology or the biochemistry with you guys, because I know a lot of you don't care about it, but without micronutrients, which is vegetables, the macronutrients, the protein, carbohydrates, and fat, they don't work in the body. So you need to make sure that you're concentrating on eating your vegetables. And then with your culture, I noticed that you guys had a lot of fermented foods, a lot of good vegetable sources. Eat those, embrace them. When you go to university, you're probably not going to find your culture food right by you, but you can cook it. Like a lot of universities inside of their dorm rooms have some formality of kitchens now because times are changing. Nutrition is becoming more important. Surprisingly enough, it really wasn't relevant. You didn't have a sports nutritionist on teams. Now they're just about in every place, every university, and especially in every professional team. So breakfast, please try to adopt that at some capacity. Think of a lot of proteins, a lot of vegetables, a little bit of carbohydrates, and then your good fats will come from the good proteins. Food options we went over, weight gain, the freshman 15, I know you guys have heard of that. I think now we talk about the COVID 20 or something like that. So in the grand scheme of things, it can be prevalent because I looked over some research on it because the university did do it. It can be prevalent, but it doesn't have to be. So it was only prevalent, weight gain was only prevalent in 45% of the freshmen and sophomores. Well, the other 65%, they were just conscious, not to a point to where they were logging their food or they're putting in MyFitnessPal. They were just aware of what they were doing. They said to themselves, you know, and I asked them, how many proteins did you eat a day? How many vegetables? And they said, look, all I wanted to do is not try to consume as much sugar and make sure I had a good protein source and make sure I drank enough water. That in itself is sufficient for you guys. So just trying to be a little bit conscious and make sure that your diets are not just consistently of the McDonald's and the Burger Kings and all the fast foods. So it doesn't have to be complicated. You don't need a meal plan. You don't have to overconsume your concept with that, but you just have to think about trying to eat healthy. And if you go into the collegiate level and you play sports, then you're going to have to dial a little bit more. But you also, your probability, if you go to a little bit bigger of a school, you're probably going to have a sports nutritionist. And if you need any help with that, you could just email me and I will gladly help you in any situation possible. Believe me as I tell you. I took this talk in like a day notice, so I'm in. I'm 100% in. So cognitive performance, we talked about that. Culture, food. So yeah, that's it. So those are my basis that I wanted to touch on, and just kind of wrapping things up. Just, you know, the one thing, and I believe me as I know, because I was young before and I've been there. But sadly enough is when older adults give you advice, it's because we lived it and we're like, man, I really wish somebody told me different. And this is your opportunity. This is the speech that's telling you now to change your movement. I didn't have the EriStars. I didn't have the club. I didn't have that. Luckily, I had at least my stepfather enough to say, look, either you're going to get out or you're going to the military. So I was like, oh, well, thanks for him. But I didn't have somebody looking over my back and saying, here, this is what you probably should do because this is what's helpful. So these are the speakers that are giving that to you. Take something, grasp it, and try to move with it, because I promise you, if you listen to Jonas, if you listen to me, if you listen just a little bit to some of these other presenters, it will change your life for the positive. We have your best interest at heart. We will never give you bad direction. So here I am, a guy through the system, foster care from Brooklyn, Puerto Rican, 2 master's degrees, some PhD in nutritional biochemistry. I will be a doctor of human performance here shortly, probably another month or so once I finish off my final defense, and soon to be a full-time professor at GCU. So I've broken the odds. I did it. And you guys are going to do the same thing. Just, you have to try. Just try a little bit harder, right? So any questions about anything nutritional, any questions about university or, you know, pathways? Like I said, I have experience, not so much at University of Maryland. I did some research there, but I wasn't actually in their system as a student or a professor. UMBC, I was their student. Same thing with Townsend. So locally to you guys, I have experience there. Oh, I also taught at Baltimore City Community College too. I taught 2 semesters there. So any questions about anything?
Mr. Acevedo, thank you so much. We're going to have some questions in a few. Let's give a clap for what an inspirational story. I mean, from foster care to about to get a PhD, you know, professor. What a life story. This is, you know, very inspirational. You know, coming from the bottom to the top, you know, as Drake says.
I mean, I legitimately live by that because it's empowering and it's real, and it's nice to hear other aspects and other people, because, you know, as I was transitioning, I heard a story like mine and I was like, you know what, it's available, it can happen. So when you get that belief system, nothing can stop you.
Exactly. So this is opening up for questions nutrition wise. I myself, was a victim of the freshman 15. I gained weight. So if anyone has any, you know, nutrition questions, this is an opportunity now. I know from this table, did you guys have any questions starting from here? Possibly. Okay. Anyone has any questions from these tables? Well, I have a question for you.
Yeah, what you got?
Yeah. So you know, they're still waking up this morning. So, you know, I myself, you know, during those final exams, stress eating, when those exams come, how do you avoid those moments, the stress eating moments?
So that's so funny. So in one of my classes, I just had this conversation because we just had midterms, and just like anything else in the world, you have to be organized. Like you were talking about SATs and who's taking their SATs, and it seemed like everyone did. But the reality is would you study for your SAT? 100%. So you have to be organized going into it. So when you're going into testing, or when you're going into something that consciously will probably stress you out, you have to somehow organize what you're going to be eating and when. And I know it's a little bit complicated in that aspect because you have to put organization into your life, but that in itself will help and prevent you from essentially either overeating or, you know, studying too long and then running out and grabbing a snack. Because what we learn especially inside of the literature, is overly studying or trying to study all the way through the night was not receptive anyway, especially if your brain was not fueled with fuel. And what is fuel? Is nutrition. So going to McDonald's is not nutrition. That doesn't do anything for your body, but actually cause internal inflammation, which actually negates cognitive function. So fast food is not going to make you smarter. It's going to hurt you. It's going to hurt your test scores. That's proven. So what you can do is eat something a little bit healthier, eat something a little bit nutrition, even if it's like a healthier protein shake. That will make you more beneficial. And I always say to this, like, have some formality. And I love the idea of students cooking, because it also, like, tying in your cultural aspect into the university makes perfect sense to me. So making sure you set up every 2 hours, I'm going to take a break, I'm going to cook my food, and then I'm going to go back to studying. And that break actually is extremely beneficial for the mind and the cognitive aspect of retention of information.
Well, there you have it. That's, you know, stress eating. That's one of the biggest weaknesses of gaining that freshman 15. You know, keep in mind too, as Mr. Acevedo says, is just, you know, compartmentalize what is causing your stress, and using that in your mind, like, okay, this exam's coming up. Let me prepare for that. So. We're kind of running out of time, and
100%.
No, thank you so much. We want to clap it up for, again, Mr. Acevedo. Great speech and whatnot. Great story, inspirational story. It's a wonderful story. And
awesome.
If you guys have any questions, you can send it to Helen, and we can connect you so that you have further questions about your nutrition. Next up, our next speaker that we have is our wonderful Sabrina Sally. And Sabrina, she is a mental health therapist. She has a master's of social work and therapist at the Personal Wellness Center at Salisbury, Maryland. And she earned her undergraduate degree in educational psychology from the University of Asmara in Eritrea. She later completed 2 graduate degree programs from Ohio University, including the Master of Arts in International Affairs, MAIA, and the Master of Social Work. And she's worked at a refugee resettlement agency that served diverse populations in Ohio, Atlanta, and Georgia. So let's give it up a warm welcome for Sabrina, Miss Sahali.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much, everyone, and I'm very excited to be here with you, and I can see you too, even though I'm not there in person. So today I'm gonna be talking about mental health. And I know when we, particularly as, me being, an immigrant myself, born and raised in Eritrea, and then working with immigrant communities, when the mental health topic is brought up, there's always like that stigma and fear associated with it. But today I know I cannot get into the details that I would like to, but I prepared some material for you that might be, more of a helpful to you guys and could relate as students. So the topic that I have is recognizing and assisting students in distress. But when I talk about this, I really wanted to focus on you. Like, it's not always others, because it's kind of implying students, meaning not me, like you're kind of trying to pay attention to other students around you, which is also part of it. But when I go through the presentation, I really want you to think about yourself, because we're going to be talking about the mind, the emotions and thought process. It's what makes you who you are. I've heard some of the presenters talk about, their experiences, health, nutrition. All of that is, of course, to take care of the body. But without the mind, we cannot function at all. So this is the core aspect of who you are. So we have to be aware. We have to know who we are, your thought processes and your emotions. These are huge factors, because if you're not mentally well, and it doesn't have to be someone like who has to go to mental health institution. It's like we're talking about anxiety and depression, which is extremely common these days, especially among teenagers. It is mental health. So if you have anxiety and depression, you cannot function well. You're not going to be successful. You cannot do well in your exams and all of that. So that's why I really want to kind of, I want you to think about yourself, reflect on yourself when I talk about this. So distress is in general, like, of course you're in stress, and there is something that your mind is calling out for help. That's what it means. So these are the list that I have in terms of for you to pay attention for yourself and your friends and your students around you. It could be poor academic performance and something that, a sudden change in your academic score. And I also wanted to say, I know you're high school students right now going to college. I used to work at the counseling center, the university here in Salisbury University. And the counseling center there, mostly, I mean, we've seen all kinds of students from, freshman to senior year, but like recalling back, the freshman year students, most of them, they came in for anxiety and depression, and the anxiety level is like fear of the unknown. Am I gonna graduate? Particularly second generation students that I've also seen, even Habesha students. So I can really kind of go back in time and think of those students, what they were, what they said and how they were feeling related to their families. And of course, there is the cultural nuance to it, because, growing up in a family of a Habesha family, there is an expectation, all of that we know. So that's a huge factor in that plays a role in their mental health, because they're afraid, I don't want my parents to be disappointed in me. I cannot do this. All of kind of fears and anxiety, kind of, you see it kind of getting in the way as a barrier in terms of their success. So other things that I've listed here, excessive absences from classes could be related to depression, mood, change in appearance, hygiene, any kind of sudden change, disrupted or excessive sleeping, anything that I wonder if you're noticing anything right now, even in your life, some of the lists that I have put there. And the bottom part, disturbed speech, is something that is more of a, might not be part of the depression or anxiety. It's more of other more severe mental health problems that could be maybe related to bipolar or schizophrenia, other things. I mean, it also happens in college years that, you know, particularly those kind of, you know, bipolar and schizophrenia, they tend to appear in late teen years. So that's why I'm kind of including it too, because, you know, you might see it happening around you. You might not know what to do, all of that. And then something that is usually not talked about is suicidal thoughts and, you know, actions or plans and, you know, things like that. Because again, even not only in Habesha community, but and also in, you know, in the US, even the you know, people who grew up, you know, without the stigma for the most part, they're still afraid to talk about, you know, their suicidal plans or ideations. Is something, of course, it's a taboo. So it's, again, because it is that way, I really wanted to emphasize it. I wanted to normalize the discussion around it, because if you think about it, which happens quite often, it should not be something that you should be ashamed of or hide it from other people. You have to really reach out to people, especially in school. I never worked in a high school setting, but if there are resources, maybe school guidance offices or anything, it's something that you need to reach out. You cannot keep it to yourself. And the same thing, homicidal thoughts are also part of course, the mental health aspect might be related to, you know, anger issues and other mental health related severe kind of cases. So, and I wanted to get into a little bit of what anxiety is. I know, you know, we hear that quite often. And I was reading one article that actually it's like in 2018, I guess, 2018 studies that they've done in the US, over around 70% of teenagers from age 13 to 17, they report to have major anxiety disorder. This is 70%, which is, you know, it's very concerning to hear that, you know, if that's come even the age range from 13. And then even sometimes they find a lot of things about even younger kids in starting kindergarten. So it's something that cannot be ignored at all. So when we talk about anxiety, I wanted to just kind of simplify it. It is, so our mind kind of, you know, the thought process, because when we refer to the mind, it's the thinking, the thought process. It's always either goes to the past, so always past kind of events that it tries to recollect and remember events, all of that. It's really, you know, related to past events, your life experiences, or future oriented, meaning what's going to happen next tomorrow. So when your mind is overly focused into the future oriented thinking, you tend to have anxiety because you're not living in the present moment. You can, right now, I'm sitting right here and I can be thinking about, what am I going to eat next? What's my plan for tomorrow? And not only just tomorrow, I could be thinking about it until like 10 years from now, 20 years from now. And then if I'm not aware, I could be consumed by it. And then usually when you think about the future, it could be a good kind of thought, thinking that comes to your mind, but usually because most people have this fear of the unknown, it's triggered by negative thinking. What if this happens? What if this happens to me? I could be doing this, or what if, there's so many scenarios that come up. So if you kind of delve into it and you don't have a sense of control or awareness, then you're bound to have anxiety, and the anxiety controls you. In your mind, it becomes real, even though it's a projection of reality. In your head, it feels real. So you cannot get out of your mind from that. That's what we call anxiety. So there are so many different kinds of anxiety, you know, you know, there's phobia, there is panic disorder. So, but the bottom line is that the foundation of it, what makes it anxiety, is to always live in the future. So that's what I wanted to make it clear for you guys. And depression. This is what I found online that I thought that kind of sums up what anxiety and depression is. But with depression, again, as I said, the mind always goes back in time. There are regrets and things that I should have done. Or if there are, you experience trauma, you relive your trauma, past trauma, and you know, you're not in the present moment. Like if something happened to me like 10 years ago, and I keep thinking about it every day, I'm living 10 years ago. My mind is still there, even though I'm doing, certain things like the mechanical activities in my present moment, but my mind is still in the past. So when you're kind of brooding in that way, you're bound to have depression. So anxiety and depression are like when you're not in an optimal, healthy state of being. You're like, if you look at it as a scale, you're off balance. Going to the extreme past or the future without having the balance of being in the present moment creates a problem. That's what we call mental health problem. So, and that's why the whole idea of meditation comes to place, because when you are in the present moment, that's what the definition of meditation or being meditative means. You are living in the right present moment. You're breathing, whatever act you do, everything is focused on that present moment. So when you live like that, if it's possible, I know sometimes with our lifestyle and everything that happens around us, it becomes extremely challenging to be in the present moment. But when you live in the present moment, all the things that even people talked about in presentation about health, physical health, and your well-being, your alertness, your focus becomes extremely enhanced, because that's how our body and mind is designed. It's almost like knowing how it's made up, in a sense that if like it's kind of knowing how it is kind of designed in its essence, So if it's almost like if you have a coffee machine and you're misusing it, instead of putting water, you're putting an alcohol or something like that. You're mixing up something that is not designed to function in that way. The end result is going to be horrible. It's going to, the machine might break, or you might have, a coffee that's not supposed to be real coffee. You know what I'm saying? So we have to also know our body and our mind, our emotions, to the point where we can live in an optimal level. So with depression and anxiety, once you understand that, so you start to be aware of everything that comes to your mind, because, if from, in our field, it is said that 90%, even more than that, I believe, of our daily activities is unconscious, meaning it's subconscious. We're not aware. It's like it's autopilot. So that means we're not really living. So it's when you look at it in that way, it's very sad. It's always like whatever we've been thinking about, projecting it up into the future, back and forth. So that's why there is so much burnt out, people going through a lot of mental health problems, because we're desperate, but we don't know how to live life in that sense. So that's something that the sooner you learn about it, the sooner you really kind of see yourself and know how to handle your mental well-being, the better. Because once you graduate high school and then you get to college, this is a huge barrier. If you keep your mental well-being to the optimum level, I can say from my experience that everything would just kind of fit into its place. You don't even need to work hard, because you're already set in your way, if that makes sense. So, all right. So the next slide is, I really want to talk about, signs of suicide, because it is quite often, even though people not necessarily get into a point of, actually doing it, the thought process, the thinking about it. If you're thinking about ending your life or hurting yourself daily, weekly, or once a month, it's not healthy. There's something fundamentally wrong in the way you're thinking about the reality, your perception of reality. It must be something that is not aligning with reality. So, the signs of, someone might be suicidal is like, if they're saying that they're feeling hopeless, there could be anger or, seeking revenge because, let's say you have issues, problems with your family members or your parents. And if I don't exist anymore, maybe they will just be happy without me, kind of thinking. I'll give you more examples after this slide, but those kind of signs are something that you need to be aware with for yourself and other people, because I really want to emphasize yourselves, because we're good at looking at other people, but not ourselves. So I can look at those signs, like if I have a friend who's sitting next to me and I can say like, I think you might be depressed, but when I'm going through that, I might not be aware. So there's always that blind spot because we don't give it time to, process what's going on inside of us. So pay attention to your inner thoughts, your inner self-talk about all the signs that I've listed here. And then some of the things that people actually say, it's as a flag, red flag, is everyone would be better off without me if I were dead. Sometimes I can't talk to, I cannot take it anymore. It might look or sound not serious when someone says sometimes I can't take it anymore, and we can just dismiss that maybe. But it's always good to, when someone, if you see them, like even like the body language is also sometimes important, how they say it, when they are saying it, to whom are they saying that, all of that. It's always good to reach out to them or talk to them, or if you don't know how to talk out to them in that kind of sense, like always try to give them resources as such. So these are some of the things people quite often say, but there's something inside that's buried that they're trying to kind of give you a sense of, in their own way, they're communicating, they're saying help me, but they cannot say it in that way. And cultural considerations. Well, this is something, of course, as I'm assuming all of you are second generation Eritreans. So your parents, when whenever they moved to the US and their relationship and all of that, there is a part of you that, of course, is, related to your background through your parents that could be quite difficult and challenging to, kind of fit in with your own identity. So when it comes to mental health, it might be unique in its own, maybe like when you hear other people, like particularly who don't have the cultural background in that sense, talk about mental health, it might conflict with the things that you heard growing up, or the taboos, or the things that you're supposed to say, not say, how you express your emotions. Are you supposed to cry in front of your parents or not? What does it mean? Particularly when it comes to gender differences, all of that. So because it's already, ingrained, or kind of, you internalize those kind of thoughts through your parents, it's something that needs to be considered. And that's why sometimes even for, when sometimes I get clients who are, from, second generation, students, even from when I was working at the university, I usually try to help them because of having that, cultural competence aspect of it, or refer them to someone who is, aware and then trained in those cultural aspects of that specific client. So I just want you to be aware, if you want, someone to talk to, it's always good, even like there are resources online where you can search if there are, therapists who are trained in cultural, variations or competence in that sense. So, because of there is the trust issue, talking to a stranger. Anyway, the list goes on. So this is something that I also want you to be aware for you, like when you're having any kind of, barriers or fears. It is natural because where you're coming from, but it's also something that you need to find resource for yourself in order to gain the help from, the professionals. And I just want to also add to that, because a lot of, again, related to the stigma, I hear a lot of Habesha people thinking like, okay, this is something that, first of all, not comfortable talking about it. And then they think that it is something that might not be preventable. If it's going to happen, it's like unfortunate, maybe it's something that no one has power to do anything about it. But I just wanted to mention here that if it is detected earlier, if you reach out, if you talk about it, it is something that could be, of course, prevented. And then you seek help. Because again, going back to the mind, when you're thinking about hurting yourself or ending your life, the term that we use, it's like a tunnel vision. So you feel like nothing else exists except I need to get out. It's almost like finding the exit, because you're in so much distress and pain. Nothing could be there for you to just even convince you. Your mind tells you like there's nothing, just give up, keep moving towards this tunnel. And then that's it. The only way out is to exit. So when you're going through that thought process, you need someone who's trained to see it and help you, bring you back to the present moment, your state of wellness. So it is possible, but again, if no one is talking about it, the silence itself is trauma. It needs to be really explored and talked about as much as possible, even at least because you're a younger generation, it's something that you need to break the cycle and talk about it as, part of what happens in life. And I'm not trying to celebrate it or anything like that, but we need to normalize it because it is what it is. It is a reality. It happens. It's quite often, especially teenagers. It happens quite often. It's quite scary. So that's why I'm trying to emphasize that. And then things that may interfere with helping. Let's say you have a friend or friends and, you see certain things. So what we do, again, this is part of the human kind of behavior that, of course, you probably know that. We assume that other people might do something about it. So we see it, but, I just think like, okay, maybe I shouldn't be involved because I'm sure someone else will do the job kind of thing. Or if it's public, like you don't want to be embarrassed, and not knowing also, because if no one talks about it, of course, how would you know what to do? So those are the things that could be a huge barrier in terms of even once you see it, like not knowing what to do. And then let's say you have a friend or, someone who and like they're going through something. And then what do you do? So these are the steps that are really helpful for the person to, and then for you to know what to do in that kind of situation. So always talk to them, any kind of, it's better to talk to them, not to say anything. So, tell me more about your concern. I want to understand, that I'm highlighting the understanding. I want to understand. It's not like if we assume what's going on, then we're not going to ask the right questions. And these are, again, recognizing your limits too, because sometimes we might get into this role of a therapist ourselves, because we want to help so much that we might give them advice that might not be helpful at all. So make sure, like, once you connect with them and understand what's going on, and they connect with you as well, and then know when to refer them, when to give them the resources that they need. Right, these are, again, more examples, like depending on the situation. Some people, particularly panic attacks, that's, again, it's happening quite often, and related to testing, final exams, or certain kind of classes. I've had clients who say, like, I just walk out from the classroom, I can't take it anymore, or had a panic attack. And then the panic attack happens, and then they say, I have fear of having panic attack in classroom. So it becomes really like this, an ordeal for them, and they don't know what to do. And, the teachers or professors, they don't know how to handle it. And even the students, so that in the classroom, everyone is at a loss. So these are the things that we can do, especially if it's, it's related to panic attack, what to do. I hope you're reading what I'm just kind of talking out of, just glancing at it. But, again, always look for resources for yourself and the people around you. And then try to always be attentive. Of course, if they're becoming violent or anything, of course, you have to, save yourself. You have to, of course, walk away. But make sure as much as possible to, contain it and then communicate with them as much as possible. Of course, you have to become, you have to feel comfortable. If you're not comfortable, then you don't have to do it. But Again, this is, I'm talking about the minor kind of mental health, not the severe mental health problem, but this is more of if it's mild to moderate kind of anxiety or depression. And then there are things that are commonly said that I want you to avoid. You know, sometimes we want to help. You know, a lot of students, everyone, when they see something, someone is in stress or in crisis, they want to help. But sometimes because we don't know, we might overwhelm them with questions and information. Do this, and then they get overwhelmed. They shut down. You know, or arguing with them. You know, sometimes. You know, again, this is quite common in Habesha communities. Like you have nothing really to worry about. You're good, like trying to motivate them, but that's not what they're looking for. They really wanted to be heard first. You have to dig in. That's also part of my job as a therapist. You know, there is a, the misunderstanding that people think that a therapist gives advice. We don't give advice. We always try to listen and try to get into the deep root causes of what's going on. Then the client himself or herself finds his own solution. You know, we don't give solutions. So once you have clarity and insight, then you're good to go. You see it for yourself. So that's our job. But because of course, I'm not saying you should, all be therapists. But what I'm saying is sometimes when you argue with them, when you're saying like, no, you shouldn't feel that. It's okay. I mean, you're good. Look at your grades. That really kind of, invalidate their feelings. So devaluing, assuming, all of that is something you need to watch out. Again, not only when you're talking to your friends, but even to yourself. That's, again, I really want to emphasize that. All of this that I have listed, we also do it to ourselves. We engage in this self-talk. We say, I shouldn't be feeling this way. I should be doing this, or devaluing yourself. So these are things that we also do to ourselves. So pay attention to that you're doing that yourself. When you're aware of that, then you won't do it. It's the awareness that would make you stop doing it, if that makes sense. So really think about, reflect on what I've been saying. And again, other examples is downplaying. We do that to ourselves and others, arguing, providing too much information. And we say, stop feeling this way, stop doing that. Again, unfortunately, it's quite common. All of this, assuming the family knows about the student's depression. And also that's something that with assumption, we kind of create our own story. Well, he is this way, she is this way. I'm sure her parents know by now. I mean, who would not know that? Kind of that's kind of thinking that we easily fall into the trap of thinking that, well, if I were in her place or in his place, I would have done this. So I'm sure she's going to do it. You know what I'm saying? Those kind of thought process. Just, we have to be very aware. So I just wanted to, again, my style is like more questions and answers kind of thing. So because I want to really hear from you, like, where you at your level, because I'm just kind of throwing all the information at you. What you're feeling and how you're processing. So I really wanted to get some questions from you. And at the end, I also provided some resources in case if you need them. This is mostly like either national or within Maryland. So if you want to use them at some point or whenever you wanted to even to give it to your friends, they're available. But for now, I would like to hear some questions from the audience.
Before we start questions, let's give it up one more time for Ms. Sally. All right, great job, great job. And again, the importance of mental health, even when you get into college, a lot of stress comes, through college. So it's very important to stay in contact and ask any questions, after the program. We may have only one question available for this time, just to speed up the process, Ms. Sally. So someone from this table, can you go up to the mic and ask your question? Who's the lucky lady over here? Eeny, meeny, miny, mo. Catch the tiger by the toe. If you want a fatifo, eeny, meeny, miny, mo. You gotta go. Come on down. If you answer right, you win a free card. Just kidding. No. Machina. That's the right Tukunya word. Machina. I have some more dad jokes for you, but we got to ask this question. You can go ahead up to the mic. Yep, go ahead. So we have one question for you, and then we're going to head to a quick lunch.
Okay.
Please state your name first. Yeah, so what are some healthier ways to manage your stress in your environment other than meditating? What are some other tricks or tricks of the trade that she's asking?
That's a good question, because I know, again, from the way you asked that question, I'm, again, assuming, I'm acknowledging the part that I'm assuming, that you probably are tired of hearing the word meditation. You need to meditate, and it's really becoming this something could be, kind of a turn off at times, because, okay, what do you want me to do to meditate? And then a lot of people have, difficulty even sitting down, and then what am I doing? What's the process? It could be very draining. So, so when you're stressed out or feeling anxious, forget meditation, because meditation is just a word. So first of all, recognizing that you're stressed, because we don't do that. Even when we're stressed, there's a physical reaction. Stress and anxiety kind of go hand in hand, but let's focus on anxiety to be more clear. So I'm anxious, let's say, because I have my final exam tomorrow. So am I aware, first of all, like physically, pay attention to your physical, your body. Do I feel that's some sort of sensation? Am I sweaty? When I'm talking to someone about my exam, is it pressured speech? How am I talking about it? And what's going on? And then go a little bit deeper. So when there is anxiety, there's always fear underlying it. So what's the fear behind that anxiety, the feeling? Okay, I have an exam tomorrow. Am I afraid that I might fail? Which is very common. If I fail, what happens? Because it's the consequence that I'm afraid of. My parents are going to be disappointed in me, or maybe there's deep-seated fear that I'm not good enough. And then if I fail, the part of me that says I'm not good enough is going to be validated. Then it's going to be horrible, because then I would believe that I'm not good enough. So you really need to dig in a little bit deeper. Where is it coming from? Why is there anxiety and exam? Because there is always this belief system or thought process that is kind of making this conclusion, which is triggering the anxiety. So again, I'm sorry, but there's no like a quick answer to it, because the anxiety is like the tip of the iceberg. You know what I'm saying? It's the surface that you see it, and it's uncomfortable, it's unpleasant, you want to get rid of it. But emotions, they don't function that way. They're actually, the moment you want to get rid of them and you resist them and you fight them, they get stronger. So we really, I wish we had more time to get into the whole emotions and that process, because any kind of resistance that you have towards your negative emotions, it makes it even more stronger. So what the way to go about it is to really pay attention. Paying attention is meditation. We use the word meditation and then it becomes really complicated thing, but the paying attention is what meditation is. So if you pay attention to it, then it becomes clear. The more clear it is, the more self-aware you are, and then the anxiety by itself kind of fades away. So that's the only short answer that I can give you for now. I hope it's somewhat clear.
All right, I think that answers the question. Great job for Miss Sally. Let's give it up for Miss Sally. All right, we got a speaker coming up. She's a wonderful speaker. Her name is Miss Miranda Hale Phillips. Before we start, I want to give her a little background. She has a Master of Liberal Arts in English. So anybody's interested in liberal arts and English. She went to Auburn University, Montgomery, May 2015. Great football team, Auburn. Cam Newton went there, if you guys know Cam Newton, Superman. She wrote a thesis on the writings of Terry Pratchett, First Steps Toward a Scholarly Annotated Bibliography, and she has a Bachelor of Arts in English, and of course, Auburn University, Montgomery, May 2011. and she has a lot of experience in education, writing instructor, adjunct English instructor at several universities, and doctoral student editor, and a whole bunch of lists. So let's give a warm welcome for Miss Miranda Hale Phillips. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yes, I've done quite a bit in the English field from a bunch of different individuals, all the way from, let's see, my first experience with teaching was actually with inmates. So I worked with inmates. And then after that, I taught at various colleges and universities, and I've taught people from all walks of life, all different ages. So I've enjoyed doing so. And a big part of teaching writing is convincing people that there's no such person as a bad writer. Nobody is a bad writer. It's understanding how you can bring your strengths to the page and showcase what it is that you do. So I definitely want to start my PowerPoint here. And I will get that for you right now. All right, so writing essays for college and scholarships. I know that this can be a very daunting concept. It can seem like a really obnoxious prospect, but it's really not too bad. So I wanted to showcase how to make this easier and things to make yours look better than you might have otherwise. So of course, we have the generic top tips, and this works for pretty much writing anything, for writing college essays in particular, but pretty much writing anything. Read the prompt or instructions carefully. This sounds really generic, but I can't tell you the number of papers I have received as a professor where the person obviously didn't read the prompt all the way through. You have to be careful with some of those. Brainstorm, outline, organize your thoughts, watch the 4 C's, we'll talk about those later, and check your spelling and grammar. Most of these I'm sure you know already, but it's always good to at least have them broken down into, hey, if you do these things, you should have a reasonable paper at that point. So the first thing is to read the prompt or instructions carefully. Now, some scholarship essays can ask some pretty heavy stuff, or they can ask things that can be very, very complex, where there's no right or wrong answer. What they're really trying to do is just see how you defend your position, or how what you have to say is interesting and unique and isn't just something that you could Wikipedia really quickly. The idea is to make you stand out in some capacity. Same thing for entrance essays. You're selling yourself to the school. You're telling the school that, hey, I am worth having a spot because I will do this for your school. So you have to be very careful to read the prompts to make sure that you are following exactly what they're actually asking for. Not maybe what you want, but what they want to hear. So you have to kind of pay attention to that. If you're given multiple options, try to find one that fits who you are, or one that you think you could write about in a way that is different than everybody else does. Don't always go for the one that is the easiest or the most generic, because that might shortchange you because everybody else might be doing the exact same thing. So think about that and make sure that you're picking one that showcases your unique talents and abilities the best. So an example of one that I've seen floating around in the wild is some students have a background, identity, interest, or talent that is so meaningful they believe their application would be incomplete without it. If this sounds like you, please share your story. This one has a max word limit of 750 words. Now that is a max limit. It does not mean you have to reach 750 words. It does not mean that you only have to do 250. The most obnoxious advice I was ever given by a professor that ends up being correct is write it till you have said what you need to say. So has to be less than 750, but it doesn't necessarily have to be enormously long. But give yourself a good opportunity to showcase who you are when you do this. So the first thing you want to do is brainstorming. Brainstorming, generally, I recommend that you physically handwrite something. I know in the age of technology in the 21st century, nobody wants to actually use a pen and paper, but I highly recommend that you do so. Multiple studies have shown that you actually become more creative when you are using a physical, tactile pen and paper than if you are typing, because you learned how to write with pencil and paper. You did not learn to write by typing. So you're going to kickstart some of that imagination in there. Plus, it gives you a chance to potentially doodle a little bit or kind of let your brain mull over the options. There are three main types of brainstorming. And if you have time to work on these, you get to potentially use all three. Collaborative brainstorming is where you're working with other people. So you might have a group of people who maybe it's your friends who are all applying to the same school or different schools, but they might have similar essay questions, or maybe they have completely different questions they have to answer, but you want to bounce ideas off each other. That's collaborative brainstorming, and that can be super useful because it gives you a chance to kind of hear what other people have to think about your options or your topic. Maybe they bring up a question that you wouldn't have thought of by yourself. This is really useful when you're talking about stuff that feels super obvious to you. You're like, well, of course I do this. Maybe other people don't. Maybe that's different and you don't realize it's different. That's where collaborative brainstorming is handy. Doodling is exactly what it sounds like. You just draw little shapes on a piece of paper. Generally, I recommend doing this while listening to something that is tangentially related to whatever your material will be, just because it's going to allow you to make connections. You could also listen to music of some sort while you mull over your question. It just lets that creativity come out of your head a little bit easier. And then structured brainstorming is where you get to the final part of putting ideas on paper. So maybe you'll have three major concepts that you know for sure you want to talk about. You write them down, you circle them, you connect them to each other, you put some more things on paper. That's structured brainstorming. It's a little bit more focused than the other ones. And some people work from doodling to collaborative to structured. Some people only do a few, some people only do one. But I do recommend that you try at least one of them. It's going to make your writing a lot better because you'll have some sort of attempt going into it where you tried to actually get yourself set up for success. The next step you want to do is outlining. And I always recommend this. Even if you're doing something you have to write very quickly, a very quick outline is better than nothing at all. This makes sure that you know exactly where you're going to go. You don't have any rabbit trails, red herrings, or anything like that in your writing. When it comes to essay writing for college and all of that, it's really important that you do this. It's really, really important that you pay attention to the outline that you have, because it's so easy for you to kind of go all over the place when you're writing. And it's very easy when you're talking about yourself to kind of get off on a tangent because you're just talking about yourself. So you want to be really careful with that. Outlining is a perfect way to lock that down. So if you realize point A isn't exactly necessary, or point B is starting to get a little off the beaten track, you can course correct without having to rewrite a ton of stuff. So outlining really saves you a lot of time. If you have a guidance director or a teacher or somebody that you trust or that you're working with, you can sometimes show them the outline and say, hey, this is what I've been working on. Does this make sense? Does this seem to fit? And they'll tell you yes or no. Yes, this is a great idea, or I'm not really so sure what you meant with this point, yada, yada. So that really gives you a good opportunity to have somebody else take a look at your work. Now, remember, an outline is not meant to take a ton of time. They are meant to be a quick list of what you're going to do in the order that you're going to do it. So if you spend too much time on an outline, you probably need to take a break and come back to it again later. So here's some examples of outlines. So you have your very quick one that should take you no more than 15 minutes. These are just your quick ideas, your thesis statement, or maybe it's the prompt itself, like what you're going to talk about. Support 1, maybe an idea you've come up with under that. Support 2, another idea, and support 3. I always go with at least 3 because 3 is a magic number in writing. I'm not quite sure why, but humans really like the number 3, and professors and instructors also really like the number 3. So the audience that you are writing to might feel like it's better written without realizing it if you have at least 3 things you're discussing. You can have more, of course, but 3 is a really good, solid place to start. So if you're talking about something that makes you unique, that makes you interesting, like maybe, for instance, for me, most people find it, when I speak to the average person in my area, they find it surprising that I grew up in England. I did not grow up in the US. And so I would think of 3 things that I did in the UK or in my European travels that other people wouldn't have done being in the US. And that's a really good way to round it out. So you have your polished outline, which is your next one. This will take you maybe half hour. And this will be topic sentence 1 because you formulated a topic sentence. Rather than just your idea, you've made it out into a polished, attention-grabbing topic sentence. People have to be interested or they won't read it. Support for it. So if you're illustrating some concept that you're talking about, or you're talking about one of your travels or maybe your upbringing, you're going to illustrate it adequately. Then you have the rest of your topic sentences. And then this is where you stick on a concluding thought. The conclusion can sometimes be really difficult to write in these. And so it's really important to make sure you have at least a concluding thought. It does not have to be complete at this point because it will most likely change as you write, but it kind of gives a way to say, how am I going to end this essay without making it too abrupt? You don't want the reader feeling like they fell off a cliff at the end of it. It really needs to end in a nice, full way. So make sure you have some kind of idea jotted down. And then if you need to write a detailed outline, not everybody does, but if you need to, there's this one. It'll take no more than an hour, and I'd be very surprised if it takes that long. So you'll have your introduction, your supports 1 through 3, or your illustrations, depending on your context, and your thesis statement. So whatever the main point is of what you're writing. And then you'll have topic sentence, support, explanation, and link. Support, explanation, and link 2 more times, and then you're going to have your concluding thought. So that is a detailed outline. So all of these are good steps, and you build off of one or the other. I have noticed with some of these essays that sometimes you don't need that much of an outline, but I find generally speaking that most people stick with somewhere between a rough and polished outline for those, because it does at least give you a chance to chart what you're doing. So the most important thing after you've worked on those outlines is to organize the information. You need to make sure that the reader is going to be able to follow your ideas from start to finish. And it needs to feel like it is organized in a way that makes sense, that's practical. Don't bounce all over the place because the reader's going to have a really difficult time following that. So are you going to arrange your ideas from most to least important, least to most, or chronologically? If you're talking about life experiences where you're talking about, like, as a child, I did X, Y, and Z, maybe chronologically is practical because you might start with the earliest thing to the most recent thing that you did. That might work. Or if you're talking about situations that impacted you significantly, you might start from least to most, just because that way you have the big reveal. It depends on what you're trying to do, but whichever it is, pick one and stick with it. Don't vary once you've started. So here's some instance here where you have old information that leads to new information that leads to newer information. And this is great because it makes it so the reader knows intuitively where you're going to go, so they don't feel stupid. You want to make sure the person reading this feels smart or feels like you are pushing their ego a little bit. That's always a good thing to do with these. New insights into global weather patterns are emerging from the recent research on the large low pressure zones rotating above the Earth's poles, known as the polar vortices. So the information that we're being started off with here is the polar vortices. That is the last sentence is telling us, oh, this is what we're going to talk about. How are we going to talk about it? It pulls it into new information. The vortices, this research suggests, are being affected by environmental changes that are leading temperatures at the poles to rise. Okay, so we have the vortices. Now we're discussing what they are and the implication of them. Okay, these temperature increases cause the vortices to deviate toward the equator, bringing with them the frigid air responsible for our recent colder winters. So we have finished with the newer information. And then, of course, if we were to have a sentence after this, it would most likely begin talking about the frigid air or colder winters and the implication of those, most likely. But you can see how it makes sense. And it's very easy to kind of track where the reader is meant to go with these sentences. So make sure yours do similar things. Is that construct there in place for the reader? In order to make that easiest for you, here is a method that will make anything you ever write for the rest of your life, no matter what it is, an absolute walk in the park. I promise. This is so easy, it feels like you're cheating. This was created by Dr. Robert Evans of Auburn University, Montgomery, and he is totally fine with me sharing it far and wide because I think it's amazing and it works, like I said, for absolutely everything. So the SEAL method will always start with a statement of some sort. You state your claim. This can either be a topic sentence or your thesis statement, either one. Illustrate will give an example for your claim. There are some keywords, and I'll show you some more later. For example, author states that, or this can be seen by, any of those things. And then the bulk of your paragraph will be explain. This is where you explain your illustration, how it relates to your thesis statement, how it proves your point. And you make sure you go into enough detail that it makes sense. So maybe 2 or 3 sentences, but they're good solid sentences that really break down what your illustration was trying to say. This is great if you have to cite some data or quote a source or something like that. Super useful in that context, because then you get to explain that you actually know what you're talking about. Then the most important thing is link. Linking can be a simple one word, either at the beginning of your next paragraph or the end of your prior paragraph, where you link to the next idea, the next paragraph. That link is really important to make sure that readers follow your paragraphs naturally and they don't feel very choppy. It can help pull your essay together and give your essay that elevated feel. So some linking words and phrases are addition words here, moreover, in addition, equally important, similarly, or likewise. And there's tons of other ones, but these are just to kind of get you started on some of these ideas. Contradiction. So if you're comparing in contrast kind of thing. In contrast, whereas, however, nonetheless, or on the other hand. Conditions. With this in mind, in order to, because of, given that, or provided that. Then you can have emphasis. In other words, to put it differently, chiefly, namely, to emphasize. Another key point. Results. This will be obviously closer to the end. As a result, thus, consequently, in effect, hence, in that case. Conclusion. As can be seen, overall, ultimately, on balance, in the final analysis, in summation, notice that the phrase in conclusion does not appear here. And that is because that is a very, very juvenile way to end anything you write. Don't do it. It will help you significantly if you don't use that phrase. You have chronology, at the present time, suddenly, later, since, next, finally. If you're using chronology, please pay attention to what order you've done so that it makes sense, so that you aren't bouncing all over the place. That's where outlines are your best friend. And then location, here, there, among, adjacent to, and opposite to. Also very important to pay attention to what you're doing there. Very easy to lose the reader in that if you aren't very clear about what you're doing. So the 4 C's that I had mentioned before, always remember the 4 C's: clear, coherent, concise, and credible. It's very important to make sure you touch on every single one of these, no matter what it is you're writing. If you're writing a scholarship essay, if you're writing an application essay, if you're writing an email to your boss, you need to have all 4 of these squared away. It's going to help you a lot. So, clear. What are we talking about? It needs to be immediately clear what we're actually talking about and how you're going to talk about it. Can you back that up or prove it? And make sure you finish informing. Have you given everybody everything they need to know? Or are you going to leave them hanging? Make sure you don't do that, especially not in application essays. Is it coherent? It needs to be organized, linked. Everything should flow naturally, supported, logical, and complete. If you're talking about something that is a bit weird or kind of off base, you need to make sure that you have a logical structure in mind. That'll be the girding support to make sure that it makes sense underneath, especially if you're doing something that's a little wacky. It's fine to do wacky, just make sure it's coherent. Are you being concise? That does not mean the same thing as being brief. It does not mean writing your entire college application essay to say, take me because I'm awesome. Like, that's great, but how are you going to show that? So being concise means that you aren't using unnecessary words that you don't have to use. Don't try to use those $5 SAT words just because you feel like they fit. Don't do that. If you can use a simpler word that absolutely makes sense, do that. I'm not saying don't use fancy words. If one fits, absolutely use it, but make sure you know exactly what you're talking about too. You don't want to misuse it and end up looking dumb. So use the right words for the right context. Don't ramble, especially if you're talking about personal instances in your life. It's really easy to ramble. Don't be redundant, so don't repeat multiple points over again. And trim your words, nice and sharp. I've noticed that students like to use what I call of constructs a lot. The jacket of Doug, no, it's Doug's jacket. Don't use that of construct. That tends to stretch your words out unnecessarily. And remember, probably the most important thing is you need to appear credible, no matter what it is you're writing about. The quality of writing will be portrayed as the credibility of your argument, no matter what level you write. If you are writing a college application essay, a scholarship essay, or if you're writing a dissertation, quality of writing equals credibility of argument. People will take you much more seriously if your writing is polished than if it isn't. It's just how it is. And make sure you pick your word choice very carefully. Know your audience. Who are you writing to? What kind of stuff do they like to see? A really easy way to do that is to go onto the college website and just kind of go through stuff that they have. Like they might have testimonials, they might have FAQs, they might have student life info. How do they talk? What do they expect? Do they have a Twitter page or a Facebook page? What kind of things do they post? What are they looking for? See that kind of structure. Pay attention to the kind of things that they like or they're constantly putting out, and make sure you're following a similar pattern with yours. Super easy trick to do. Works with job application stuff too. So some top mistakes now that you're actually writing it that I have noticed in my career. Subject-verb agreement, comma splices, incorrect pronoun usage, verb tense mix-ups, dangling or misplaced modifiers, apostrophes, passive voice, prepositions, and parallel structure. So I'm going to go over these briefly. So subject-verb agreement sounds pretty common sense, and most of you probably do just fine with the usual ones. Singular subjects require singular verbs. The dog is happy with her ball. Singular dog, dog is. Plural subjects require plural verbs. The cats aren't fond of that food. Plural cats aren't being the plural verb. But there are tricky subjects sometimes, like neither, either, those kind of words. Neither is going to the party, not neither are going to the party. Now, don't be afraid to Google things if you're not sure. I do this all the time because sometimes you'll write a really complicated sentence and you'll use the word either, and the verb just doesn't quite feel right no matter what verb you use. Check. Never hurts to check, but know that neither and either are always considered singular nouns, so they come with singular verbs. They're weird and they're wonky, and it feels weird no matter what you do. So double check, never hurts. Be careful with your compound subjects and verbs. Huey, Dewey, and Louie are making a mess again. If I wash and dry the clothes, will you fold them? So make sure that everything fits where it's supposed to, especially if you have really long sentences where you maybe forgot what your subject was, and make sure the verb is. So always double check to make sure. Every sentence is broken down to a subject and verb as the two most simple parts of a sentence. If you aren't sure if you've done it right, find your subject and verb and stick them together and make sure they fit. That's it. As long as they do, you're good. Comma splices are a particular crime that I see a lot. Remember that commas can't join two independent sentences all by themselves. They just can't do it. So if you have two independent sentences, you need to use a comma and a conjunction, comma and, comma or, comma yes, comma no, or a semicolon. A semicolon replaces a comma and conjunction. Now, I must warn you, don't use them over and over again. If you've used a semicolon in one sentence, don't use it in the next one. Change up your word structure. You don't want to use them a lot because, they're kind of like speed bumps thrown in there. You don't want too many of them. An example of a comma splice: today will be a nice day. It will be the day I get my bonus. Those are two independent sentences that need to be joined either with a comma and conjunction or a semicolon, depending on the flow that you want. And please notice I did not say colon. Has nothing to do with that whatsoever. Colons have their own rules, not the same thing. Incorrect pronoun usage. This happens sometimes, especially if you're not paying attention. Do you have a clear antecedent? An antecedent is just a fancy word for the thing that came before. Is it abundantly clear who or what you mean? So if there are two she's or he's in your sentence, make sure that everybody knows exactly who that refers to. Same thing with they. They said that they need to go there so that they can work with them. I don't know who any of these theys are. Make sure it's abundantly clear to the reader exactly what you mean. The pronoun it never refers to a person grammatically or politely, so that's easy enough. Countries use it now. Like they used to be gendered into she for some reason, but they are no longer anymore. So countries are always referred to as it. Which versus that. That is used when information is absolutely essential to the sentence. My book that I need for school is on my desk. The implication there, of course, being I need you to go get that book for me so that I can go to school with the book that I need. Which is used when you don't need the information necessarily. It's just giving us extra info. My book, which I use for school, is on my desk. Just telling people where it is. Don't need it, don't have to have it right this second, but it's extra information. I versus me. Sometimes we're not sure where that goes or which one we're supposed to use. So put it at the beginning of the sentence to see if it makes sense. Jordan and I would like to go. I would like to go. Jordan and me would like to go. Me would like to go. Not so much. So very easy, very simple fix with that. Verb tense mix-ups. This is something I do see, especially if somebody's writing about something that happened in their past. It's very easy to accidentally switch between past tense and present tense. I prefer to write in past tense for the most part because to me it doesn't feel as overwhelming than it does writing in present tense. But if you feel like you need to write in present tense, do so. Just make sure you're consistent, that you don't bounce all over the place. Remember the subjunctive exception. The subjunctive is really weird. Occasionally we have to use the subjunctive case. If I were you, not if I was you. So the subjunctive is a theoretical that can't ever happen because I can never be you. So I would use were instead of was. And remember that passive voice is not the same thing as past tense, despite the fact that passive voice does use past tense. They are not the same thing. Dangling or misplaced modifiers are another thing that I see people stumble over, and it's very easy to do so if you aren't paying attention. When you add modifiers, they can be adjectives, adverbs, or even comma structures that are just designed to modify something. You need to make sure that they're actually going where they're supposed to. Knowing Celeste was late, the meeting began anyway. Well, the meeting is not sentient. The meeting cannot decide to begin. Somebody has to decide that the meeting will begin, and somebody must know that Celeste was late. So who is it that knows Celeste is late? The chairman knows Celeste is late. So that's a modifier that is not in the right spot. Be really careful with that because those can be tricky. Those ing phrases at the beginning are very often ones that end up with a misplaced modifier. Make sure that your clarity of purpose is there. It's very obvious what you mean. Happily, the waiter sat down versus the waiter sat down happily. Now, in the first instance, when we say happily, the waiter sat down, it makes it sound like I'm annoyed that the waiters are standing around. Like maybe it bothers me personally, not them, me, it's external. Now, the next one, the waiter sat down happily, sounds like the waiters themselves are relieved to finally be sitting down because maybe they're tired, maybe it was a rush, but that's internal. So the first one was external, the second one is internal. So make sure you're using whichever one you actually intend. Listening to loud music slowly gives me a headache. Imagine most of us would have it give us a headache because most of us do not listen to music slowly. We listen to music at the speed it was recorded, unless we're being extra for some reason. When I listen to loud music, I slowly develop a headache. So the modifier was in the wrong spot. It was meant to modify developing headache, not the music. And place modifiers where they matter most. And this is completely up to you when it comes to creativity. Carefully, she opened the ancient door. She opened the ancient door carefully. So in that first one, we're focused on the word carefully because it's at the beginning of the sentence and it begins with that hard K sound, carefully. The second one, we focus on the ancient door because it's illustrated to us. She opened the ancient door carefully. So we care more about the ancient door. But that's up to creativity. So just make sure that you're putting it where you really want it to go, whatever it is that you want to do with it. Apostrophes. These are a pitfall in so many things I've seen, especially the word it's, it apostrophe s, it is versus it belongs to it. Now, generally speaking, possession requires an apostrophe. Achilles, S with the apostrophe. No extra S. We don't add an extra S in American English. Was disappointed in the battle's outcome. No S. Add the apostrophe S. Generally speaking, you're going to add apostrophe S to use the singular nouns. For plural nouns, sometimes they just need the simple apostrophe unless it doesn't end in S, in which case you'll have to add the S. Apostrophes are also used in contractions, which are two words smeared together. Aren't, are not, would've, would have, let's, let us, not the same thing. Y'all'd is a Southern triple contraction. I hear it quite a bit down here. I would not recommend using it in writing. You can use it when you talk if you want to, but unless you're from here, probably wouldn't make a lot of sense to people. Please note that when you're using lowercase letters with apostrophes to make them plural, it uses apostrophes. So E's and B's, A's, B's, and C's, like when we're talking about grades, it's going to be lowercase with the apostrophe. That's the only case that it makes them plural with that. If you aren't sure, of course, with what you're doing, consult whatever style guide you're going to be using. So proper plural nouns, the Harris's residence, we generally just stick an apostrophe on there. It's not usually done to change people's name structure. So usually leave the extra S off if you don't need it. It makes it easier anyway. You don't really need to add extra stuff. Simple as that. So now we get to passive voice. Passive voice is something that I'm sure you've heard teachers go on and on about. And it is important when you're talking about college application essays and things like that to try to use active voice as much as possible, because it's going to make people more interested in what you're writing, because it's going to make what you write sound more immediate. So mistakes were made versus I made mistakes. You need to make sure your writing is very direct. Make sure you don't mislead or misdirect the reader. Make sure that it is very clear. So passive happens when the object of a sentence is put at the beginning of a sentence instead of at the end, versus passive happens when the writer puts the object of the sentence at the beginning instead of at the end. So weird, clunky, awkward, but make sure that the main point that you're doing is where it goes. So which is easier to read? I baked the cake versus the cake was baked by me. Say the thing you actually straight up mean first. If you always put your subject first, you're going to be a lot happier anyway. So I'm not going to read all of these because these are ridiculous. But if you have a word that is your kryptonite in particular, you don't have to feel bad because everybody does. So there are some of these that I struggle with sometimes, especially if I haven't written them for a long time. Like embarrass has a lot of things that are doubled and then some things that aren't. Millennium, millennia, a lot of doubled letters. Preferred, preferring, occurred, occurring. Occasion has some that are doubled, but some aren't. So if you have a particular word that you know that you struggle with, that's okay. Just make sure you're paying attention to what you're writing and say, okay, like, does this fit? Does it look right? And of course, if you're typing most of these, which most of them you will, use your spell checker. But pay attention because spell checkers are not your best friend. Spell checkers do not understand context at all. They just read the word for what it is. I have a spelling checker. It came with my PC. It plainly marks for my review mistakes I cannot see. I ran this poem through it. I'm sure you're pleased to know. It's letter perfect in its way. My checker told me so. Now, when I write, I know I'm right from Halo to goodbye, because everybody knows by now computers do not lie. Which obviously, reading it out loud, it makes sense. It is probably very difficult to read that though, because these are all correct words, but they don't mean what the writer meant. So do be careful with that, because Microsoft Word in particular doesn't necessarily understand what you're trying to say. There are spell checkers and things out there that are designed that are better than that, but your best bet is probably peer review over a spell checker and potentially somebody who is really good at spelling. Have them take a look at it. So we get to revising, editing, and proofreading. And this is really important to do for everything, but it's very important to do for these essays because you want to make sure you're giving your best work. You're presenting the best version of yourself. So revision is the heaviest duty version of these three things. It's the wrecking ball of the editing process. It's where you might rearrange sentences, delete entire chunks of it, check for errors, verify content. If you've claimed something, ask yourself why. Did you answer the claim? Then great. If you didn't, you need to make sure you do that. Editing is after you've done the revising. You look for errors in spelling, grammar, style, and syntax. Maybe there's a particular way you're supposed to write and supposed to talk. Maybe you slipped up a few times. That's where you fix it. And then proofreading is the final step. It's the final touch to make sure that you've made as close to perfect as you can. Last minute sloppy errors, typos, word misuse, Microsoft Word, Grammarly might miss something, or sometimes computers do weird things and there's a hiccup where you copied and pasted something, it looked fine, and then you moved a page and all of a sudden it's not. That's where proofreading comes into play. So some tips for proofreading that are really useful, especially if you may not have a lot of people around you who are super helpful, or maybe you don't have access to things you would prefer. Microsoft Word has a read aloud feature, and this is amazing. It can save you a ton of time and effort with that feature, because then you'll hear in a slightly robotic voice somebody reading your words back to you. You'll catch mistakes immediately if you are having Microsoft Sam or Microsoft Sally read you your paper. Very easy to work with that. If you're able to, sleep on it. Walk away from it for a day. Give it a chance to kind of percolate and sit in the back of your head, because if you've been staring at it for a while, you are not going to catch mistakes at all. I have to tell students many, many times, you need to take a break and go do something different. You've got to. Change the font. Use a font you don't like, or a font that's easier to read. If you have dyslexia or any kind of reading issues, change it to a font that is nice and round, sans serifs, anything. It doesn't matter, just so that you can read it. Change it back when you're done, but it's much easier when you do it that way. And especially if you're submitting things in their little like form box, they won't allow you to use other fonts anyway. But that's a really good way to do it. I use Courier New if I'm checking for stuff, because I don't like it at all. I absolutely hate it, can't stand it. So I will catch mistakes just because I'm annoyed at everything I'm reading. Read your paper backwards. This is a really weird trick that I have found very, very helpful. And I don't mean literally word for word backwards, but start at the last sentence and work your way to the top. The reason this is useful is because when you read from start to finish, you make a lot of assumptions. And since you wrote the darn thing, you know what's coming next. When you read it backwards, you break that flow, you break that pattern to the point where you have to pay attention to every single individual sentence all by itself. So you may find that particularly beneficial. So read it backwards. Use the Microsoft Word Read Aloud feature. And then, of course, finally, if you're able to peer review, have somebody else take a gander at it and see what they think. Does it make sense? Do they like it? Or is there stuff that they're not so keen on? Or maybe do they think you missed the point? This is where you can ask a teacher or educator or somebody that you trust to take a look at it, just to say, hey, what do you think? And go from there. Never a bad choice to do that. So an example of an essay that I wanted to talk about, using the SEAL method in particular. So we have this prompt that we discussed at the beginning. Some students have a background, identity, interest, or talent that is so meaningful, they believe their application would be incomplete without it. If this sounds like you, please share your story. And I'm sure some of you have all kinds of stories from your upbringing or potentially from your background that are maybe interesting or maybe define who you are. They don't necessarily have to be super different from everybody. The thing is that everybody's upbringing in some capacity was different. Everybody's childhood was different because nobody lives exactly the same thing, and it shapes who you are. So maybe there is something that you do that is so much a part of you that people don't speak of you without thinking of that thing, whatever it is. Maybe it's like you're a really big soccer player, or maybe you're a pianist or an artist of some sort. Whatever it is, some sort of thing that creates who you are. What is it? So here's a statement. Both of my parents were active duty military, which led to my growing up all over the world. So I'm trying to grab attention by saying, hey, my parents were this, which thus led to this. And it is interesting to think, oh, someone grew up all over the place. That's interesting. For instance, that's the illustration word. Despite being born in Texas, I spent my early years in England. I put that there intentionally because it's quite a juxtaposition from good old San Antonio, Texas to the UK. So that's my illustration. Then I explain why that's interesting. I grew up visiting castles and sites of historic interest that many Americans only read about in history books. Walking the impressive halls of King's College, Cambridge, instilled me with a love for learning that persists to this day. Now, does it really? Maybe not. But do I think that somebody who is like reading this at a school is going to be interested? because it makes it sound like I like to learn a lot of stuff. Yes, absolutely. So remember, you can shape things around what your reader wants to hear. I'm not saying lie at all. Don't lie, because those usually fall apart pretty quickly. But what I'm saying is make sure you're writing to your audience. Know what they're looking for, know what they're interested in, and write it to that point. England was not the only place I got to explore as a child. So I'm going to talk about someplace else I went and talk about that. And so this is part of my background, my identity as being a military brat moving around that I think is meaningful to me. So that's what I'm going to talk about in this one. So, and that's the SEAL method right there. Super easy, hardly any effort whatsoever. So that's why I say always try to use the SEAL method if you can. It's very handy, very helpful. It might take a little bit of practice to do it, but that's all there is to it. State, illustrate, explain, and link. Are there any questions?
Before we move on to the questions, let's thank Miranda, Hale, Phillips for a wonderful presentation. And I saw a lot of you taking notes about college essays. So let's give a warm, thank you for her. That was great. Great job. And the importance of college essays, it can make or break your entry into a college. I like the fact she stated about, even the small details like apostrophes or commas or modifiers or whatnot. Those things are very important to people that are reading your essays because they're going to be looking at those things. So make sure to have those notes and use that in your essay, and make sure you write a compelling essay when you turn into college entry. We have a question on this table over here. One of you all can, if you can come up to the mic, ask your question. Up top and be as loud as you can.
My name is Fiona, and I'm a junior. So I want to ask the question, when is it the best time to start your essay, so that it can be you have a perfect time to write your draft and ask people around you and kind of finalize it.
Okay, that's a good question. So as a junior, I would say you can start looking into these essay questions now. Schools don't tend to change them a whole lot every semester, but I would say the fall before your senior year, if you can, take a look at the kind of stuff that they're talking about. What are they looking for with students? What kind of questions are they asking? Or maybe there is something that has happened to you that is for sure shaped who you are as a person, no matter what. That will never change. Maybe it was early on in your life. Well, you can start writing about it now. And the benefit to that is you might be able to put in say essay competitions. And so you can have that for your resume when you're applying to say, oh, I submitted this essay and won this award or whatever. It's never too early to start working on it. Just know that your actual prompt for the college might change a little bit based on what year you apply to. So I would say probably the fall before you apply.
Do you have another question? All right. Does anyone have any questions about essays? Okay, great. Let's look, another warm welcome to warm thank you to Ms. Miranda Hale Phillips. Great presentation. Thank you so much for coming. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Greatly appreciate it. All right. So, okay. All right. So let's give a warm welcome to Acevedo Longe. Before we get started, she's a Towson University graduate, political science economics, and she's admissions counselor at Towson University, Maryland. Acevedo Longe, everyone. Clap it up. There you go.
Wow, such a warm welcome. How are you all doing today? Good. Y'all have been here all day. I'm sorry. I promise I won't make this, too difficult. I'll try and make this as enjoyable as possible. But again, I'm Acevedo Longe. I'm an admissions counselor at Towson University. I actually recruit in Baltimore County schools, both public and private. So technically, I am not your admissions counselor. But that doesn't mean I don't have a lot of important information that I can share with you today. I got my degree in political science and economics from Towson University. While I was at Towson, I participated participated in a lot of different activities. I was in the marching band. Yes, I was in the band. I participated in different clubs such as Building Council. I was in ADC, the African Diaspora Club. I'm Nigerian, so you know, I'm on the other side of Africa. So I'm gonna share a little bit of information with you about Towson University and how to navigate college, okay? All right, you can go ahead. So Towson University. First of all, let me ask, have any of you visited Towson? Put a hand up so I can see. Oh, wow, none of you?
No, one person over here.
Wow, okay, that's it? Okay, that's okay, I forgive you. So I really encourage you to go and take a campus tour, no matter what school you are looking at. The campus tour can really help you make your decision. While I was looking at colleges, I have visited a range of different schools, and it wasn't until I stepped foot onto Towson's campus that I was actually able to make my final decision. I kind of like to say it's kind of like say yes to the dress. You don't really know till you get there. I did not want to apply to Towson when I was a student. I said absolutely not. I didn't really have a reason for it, but I just was very adamant about not going. And it wasn't until I actually came for a campus tour and got to see all the different buildings and meet all the different students that I was actually able to make my decision. So we have campus tours Monday through Friday on campus. We're not too far away from here. We're about less than an hour. So I definitely recommend you come and visit us. But back to my presentation. So Towson University, we are the fastest growing university in the state of Maryland. We have a little over 20,000 students, well, 22,000 students at the university. Majority of those students are undergraduate. Okay, we just admitted our largest and most diverse freshman class, with 53% of those students identifying as a minority student, okay? So we are not an HBCU, we are technically a PWI, but over the years we have grown to become so diverse. We're about 50-50 with non-white and white students. So it's a really good diversity on campus. I would say that when you step onto campus, you don't feel like you're lost. We have some Towson grads in the audience, and they might be able to even tell you that when you step on the Towson's campus, you'll find people who look just like you and meet people from all different types of backgrounds. We have students that come from Australia, from Africa. We have students that come all the way from Hawaii, which I think is really crazy. I would never leave Hawaii to come to Maryland. But that just kind of goes to show that we have something to offer students from all over the world, okay? All right. So this is a picture of our campus. What you'll notice is that in the center here, we have our academic core. So to get from one end of campus to the other, it's about a 15-minute walk, 20-minute walk. But all of the academic buildings are located in the center of campus. So if you want to go from the College of Liberal Arts to Stevens Hall, the College of Business and Economics, that's maybe about a 6-minute walk in between buildings. But then if you want to go into Uptown Towson, that's about a 15-minute walk from maybe West Village, which is our newer part of campus, where you can go to the movie theater, you can go to different restaurants, and different places for recreation on campus, okay? All right, really quickly, I want to call on some people and ask them if they have any majors they're interested in. Just shout them out at me. Shout it out.
Come on, guys. Speak up.
Engineering, ooh, I'm sorry. We don't have that. I'm sorry. But what I will say is that if you are interested in engineering, man, you have to yell that out, we don't have it. What I will say is that we do have a dual track program. So you would start at Towson with a degree in physics, and then you would start there for about 2 years, and then you would transfer to University of Maryland. And by the time you graduate from UMD, you would get your degree in physics and engineering. So then you would graduate with a dual degree program. So if you really did want to start at Towson, you could, and then transfer to UMD. And it's a really great program. You get physics and engineering. Those two go really well together. And a lot of students really like that track, but unfortunately we don't have engineering. Somebody yell out a major we do have. Psychology, that is one of our most popular majors on campus. Anybody else? Computer science, awesome. So we just got a huge grant from the government to work with the NSA. We do a lot of different internships with the NSA, the DoD, Department of Defense as well. And then as a computer science student, you actually get to work for the university and get to put those hands-on skills to use. So you get experience once you graduate from the university. Because what you'll notice is when you graduate from school, a lot of jobs are gonna ask you for experience. And you're gonna say, well, I just graduated, I don't have any. But it's really great that you start to get that hands-on experience from the university. What I'll also point out is that we are the largest producer of teachers in the state of Maryland. We originally started out as a teaching college, and we like to say that we place 100% of our teachers. And a lot of them end up in Montgomery County schools. Like here, I'm a Blake grad. And then we also have students that in a nursing program. We are the second largest producer of nurses in the state of Maryland, with about almost 90% of our nursing students pass the NCLEX, the nursing examination, on the first try, which is a really big deal too, so if you're thinking about nursing. But what I will say is that we are a major blind university. We don't care what major you're going to apply with. You can apply undecided, you could apply with computer science today, and by your second year, you could change to art. We don't care, we just want you to come to the university, okay? And even if you come undecided, we will set you up with an FYE advisor. They will help you with that transition from high school to college, will help you pick your classes out, and will help show you how to navigate college and this experience of joining the adult world. FYE, First Year Experience Advisor. So as a freshman, well, you don't pick your classes your first year, we do. And it's not we're just gonna pick them for fun. You'll take an AIF, an academic interest form, and we'll collect that information from you. You'll tell us, oh, well, I'm interested in this major, but I also would like to take, you know, an art class, or I might wanna take a, I don't know, a poetry class. And we'll start to pull those classes for you to make sure you take your prerequisites, which are basically your general ed classes like English 102, your math classes, and then we'll throw in a couple classes from your major and things you may be interested in. That way you can start to get a feel for what you are actually going to be studying. And then maybe you might want to change your mind, and maybe that actually confirms that that's what you would like to study. And you get that FYE advisor during that first year period at the university, and they actually help you navigate that first year until you get your actual advisor your second year at Towson, okay? Here we have a picture of Burdick Hall. This is, well, one of our newer buildings. You have a lot of new buildings on campus. The Burdick Hall is our gym, so that was, I want to say, 100,000 square foot expansion. We have an American Ninja Warrior course. The first woman to ever complete the American Ninja Warrior course was a Towson University grad. We have a rock wall. If you want to go canoeing in the pool, you can do that. We have a badminton studio, Soul Cycle, kickboxing club, basketball courts, basically everything that you're dreaming of. And then we are also a D1 school. We have 19 Division I sports on campus. Well, let's say you don't want to play D1, that's understandable. You can also play at an intramural or club level on Burdick Field. Here's a picture of West Village. This is one of our newer options on campus. This is where we have our premium housing. Premium housing costs a little more. It's about $600 extra a semester, so about $1,200 for the year. Some students choose this option. I always say you're going to graduate with debt anyway, so it's a little more sprinkled on top. But then you can also have to consider what is best for you financially. To live in a place that's going to add a little more onto your debt once you graduate. But the really nice thing about this side of campus is that you get your own bathroom. You don't have to share with anybody but your roommate, which I think is really nice. We also have lots of food options here. This is our West Village Dining Hall. We have 4 dining halls on campus. And on this side of campus, you'll find Panda Express, Einstein Bagels, Piadina, and then a little grocery market as well. Johnny Unitas Stadium, this is where we play our football games as well as graduation. Graduation was held on the field last year due to COVID, but it was actually really nice to have a really beautiful graduation outside. We have the Siki Arena where we play basketball. We also throw concerts in there every year. Have y'all heard of Tiger Fest? No, it's an event that we do every year in the spring where we bring in artists to campus to perform for us. So we brought artists like Playboy Cardi, Rico Nasty, Ari Lennox, Giveon, a whole bunch of different people that you're listening to right now. We've also brought a lot of really entertaining guest speakers. We've brought Hassan Minaj, she's on The Daily Show. He also has a special on Netflix, and different speakers to give guest lectures on campus. So it's not always about fun. Sometimes you actually get to learn something, which I think is nice as well. All right, here's what we have new at TU. So this is the University Union renovation. It's anticipated to open fall 2021. It is fall, and it's not open, but that's okay. We're hoping that it will be open in the spring semester, but it is 180,000 square foot expansion, I believe. So we're bringing a full service Chick-fil-A, so you can finally get your spicy chicken deluxe on campus and your milkshake. We're bringing a Dunkin' Donuts because obviously America runs on Dunkin', so we have to have the Dunkin' Donuts. And just a whole food market, which is really nice, and lots of space for lots of club organizations and student resources on campus. And then we also have, can we go back one? Thank you. And then the new science complex. So we are a liberal arts college, but we also have a focus on the sciences and STEM majors. So the new science building was completed in the spring. It was a $180 million project, and it's over 300,000 square feet. It is a beautiful building. It has over 30 different research laboratories. It has touchscreen cadaver labs. It has a planetarium, an observatory, a greenhouse. So there's lots of different things that you can use here in the new science complex. And it kind of shows you that we are still dedicated to the sciences at the university. And we just broke ground on the new College of Health Professions. We have been declared the future of healthcare. Do I know who said that? No, but we have been declared the new future of healthcare, which I think is really nice. And then here we have some pictures of Uptown Towson. So if you haven't gone to the area, there are a lot of fun things to do in Uptown Towson. We have the mall, which is huge, 4 different levels. I was there the other day and I lost my car on the wrong floor. We have Towson Bagelery, very popular place for students. Burger Bros, one of my favorite food places off campus. We have the Cinemark. If you take your one card, you can get a student discount, which is really nice. While I was a student, I went to go see Black Panther with my friends, and it turned out it was the whole Towson University, basically at the movie theater, which I thought was really cool as well. And then there's a place if you want to throw axes, get some aggression out if that's something that you're into. There's a range of different activities that you can do in Uptown Towson. So not only do we have on-campus events, but we also have a lot of things in the area. We are truly a college town. We are surrounded by Loyola, Goucher, Morgan State, Johns Hopkins University, so you're surrounded by a lot of other college-age students as well. All right, and then living on campus. We have 18 different residence halls on campus. They range from apartment style to hotel style, suite style. Apartment style is reserved for our upperclassmen students, so we have a 4-bedroom apartment. You each get your own room. There's a lot of space in these rooms. There's a bathroom, there's a full kitchen, fully furnished living room, so you get the, the independence of getting to live on your own, but you don't have somebody asking you for rent at the first of the month, which I think is kind of nice. Then we also have hotel style, which I briefly mentioned before, where you have the bathroom in your room you share with your roommate. We have quad style, so you have the 4 different quads that share the bathroom with the quad. But we also have community style bathrooms, so you would share the bathroom with the floor. What I will say is that all of our bathrooms have been renovated within the last 2 years, and all of our buildings have AC, okay? Y'all don't seem excited, but what you will find out when you're looking at colleges is that not every university actually offers AC in their buildings, and we do, which is really nice, okay? So these are things that you want to consider when you're looking about housing options on campus as well. And then food, which everybody cares about. We have a range of different food options. We have 4 different dining halls, but then we also have a la carte options, Panda Express, we have Starbucks, we have the Chick-fil-A, which is coming back. We have an Indian food place, all-day pasta station, all-day omelet station, basically food galore. There's a range of different food options for you on campus that you can use with your one card, your meal plan. If you are a student living on campus, you are required to have a meal plan. And also you are not required to live on campus as a freshman. So if you want to live off campus, if you want to be a commuter, that is completely up to you. All right, student life. So again, 19 Division I sports. They range from baseball, basketball, football, track and field. But if you don't want to play at a D1 level, we also offer that at an intramural and club level. But what you'll notice, our intramural club sports, they actually are really competitive. They play with other schools. They travel all over the East Coast, which I think is really nice. Not a lot of schools offer that. And then we also have more than 250 clubs and organizations. So we have ADC, the African Diaspora Club, where you'll find all the different Africans across the continent. We get together and we have a really great time. They do events on campus. We have different religious and spiritual orgs. We have honors organizations. So if you're interested, you want to be a woman in STEM, we have clubs for those. Basically, we have everything. And if there's something that we don't offer, you just need 5 friends and an advisor, and you can create your own club. And then we also have a study abroad program, so students can basically go anywhere in the world. I definitely recommend the program. Usually the number one thing that pops up when I'm talking about study abroad is cost. How am I going to afford it? And that's definitely a big deal. So we offer scholarship and grants specifically for the study abroad program to make it more affordable for you. And then we also offer shorter study abroad trips. So in high school, your winter break is about what, like 10 days, something like that. When you get to college, winter break is about 5 to 6 weeks. So instead of studying abroad for a full 15-week semester, you would study abroad for 5 to 6 weeks, which is going to be a little easier on your pockets. So there's ways to get around it. You can also do study away, which is domestic. So you get to stay within the United States, and maybe you want to go to a different university for a semester. I don't know, maybe you want to go to school in Ohio for a semester. You can do that with the study abroad program as well. All right, so let's get into the nitty-gritty. What are you looking for in a college? So some of you are juniors, seniors, and seniors, you're probably already submitted a good chunk of applications. But for those of you that haven't started looking, you want to think about the type of college that you're applying to. There's a range of different schools. There's liberal arts colleges. There are art colleges. There are colleges that focus solely on STEM and medicine, and you want to think about this when you're looking at schools. What do I want out of my education? You want to think about location. Location's a big deal. Do you want to go to school in an urban area, in the city? Do you want to go to school somewhere rural where you kind of have to drive a little bit out into the country to get to your school? Or do you want to be right in the city in all of the noise and in the traffic and the excitement? Or do you want to be a little bit more suburban, which Towson is more like a little more of a suburban area, but we also have the city, which is not too far away from us. So these are things that you want to consider. You want to talk about the size of a school. Towson is about a little over 22,000 students. Our average class size is still only 24 students, and our ratio is about 16 to 1. So you'll never really be overwhelmed by the size of a class that you're attending. My largest class while I was at Towson was about 45 students, and my smallest one was 8. So you'll never be in a super huge classroom, but then maybe that's something that you're interested in. You want to be in a class that has a bigger class size. You want to be surrounded by more people. Towson is definitely not small enough that everybody knows your business, but it's also not big enough that you won't bump into a friend on your way to class, which I think is really nice as well. So these are things you want to take in consideration when you're looking at colleges. Programs of study, like I mentioned before, Towson doesn't really offer an engineering program, okay? As admissions counselors, we want you to come to our school. So sometimes we will kind of manipulate the truth a little bit and try and say, well, we don't have that major, but we have this, which is kind of close. Don't go for kind of close. You want to go for the major that you are looking for. So you want to make sure you're paying attention to what programs that school offers, and also the success rate of those schools. Towson, our graduation rate is about 72%. And I know that sounds, to you that might sound kind of low, because in high school, graduation rates are a little higher into the 90s, 95%. But the average graduation rate for nationally is closer to a little over 40%, okay? So Towson does a really good job of that. We also graduate more Black students in comparison to our other races at the university, which is really interesting as well. So we're making sure that we are taking care of all of our students at the university. And then support and resources. So no matter where you go to school, you're paying all of this money, so that school not only gives you an education, but they also support you in return. So that goes for mental health services, medical services, writing center, tutoring center. I will tell you right now, I did get my degree in economics, but I am horrible at math. Like extremely bad at math. They put me in passer field math when I got to Towson. I'm not good at it. And if it wasn't for the help with the tutoring center, I don't think I would have graduated. So we have lots of different programs through the writing center. I wrote a 35-page paper upon graduation, and it was horrible. But with the help of the writing center, they helped me organize my thoughts. They helped me increase my page count. They helped me with my grammar and with my spelling, and I was able to turn in a paper that got an A. And that was with resources that the university offered. And no matter what school you go to, use the resources that they have. You're paying all of this money. Don't let it go to waste, okay? And then safety, you want to think about where is the school located? Is it in a safe area? What type of support services they offer in terms of safety? We have a blue light system, that's common for a lot of universities. We also have a TUPD escort, so maybe you're leaving the library late at night, they will escort you back to your room, back to your car on campus. You want to think about what do they do to make sure students feel safe on campus. So you want to take these things into consideration when you're looking at schools. All right, what are colleges expecting from you? Strong academics and grades. So we are really looking at that 9th through 11th grade year because you're in the middle of completing your 12th grade year. So you may feel like, you know what, I messed up my freshman year. And that's absolutely okay. We like to see progression in grades. So maybe you didn't do so well your freshman year, but then when you got to your sophomore year, you started to pick up the momentum, you started taking honors classes, maybe even started taking AP classes, and you started to grow and develop as a student. We love to see things like that. So one bad year is not gonna affect you, okay? We wanna make sure that you're paying attention to the rigor of your classes, because if you're at a school that offers AP, IB, honors classes, but I look at your transcript and all I see are a bunch of just on-level courses, it's gonna make me feel like you didn't challenge yourself as a student. So you wanna make sure that you're challenging yourself, and you wanna make sure that while you're challenging yourself, you're staying on top of your grades and staying on top of your assignments. But that's not to say that you shouldn't pay attention to your senior year. I am still going to see it. So even if I admit you to the university and I see your final transcript upon graduation, you don't want me to give you a call and say, hey, what's going on? We don't want that to happen, so we wanna make sure we're staying on top of our transcript our senior year, okay? Submit your application materials on time. Towson University, our early action deadline is December 1, okay? Early action is non-binding. There is no contract. It means if you apply early, you're gonna hear back early from us, okay? And that means we have to have all your application materials. That is not only your application, but we also have to have your transcripts. If you're sending us test scores, we have to have those by December 1. Not December 3rd, because then I can no longer consider you for early action. And our early action deadline means you will automatically be considered for merit-based scholarships. You don't have to do anything extra, just apply by December 1 and we'll automatically consider you. But that's only if you get your things in on time. And if you're applying to multiple schools, it might help to create a spreadsheet, maybe a notebook, write down all of these different dates to make sure you're staying on top of it. Because some schools had November 1st deadlines. Some schools have November 15th deadlines. You wanna make sure you're staying on top of that so you don't miss a deadline. And then you're sad. Because if you call me upset on the phone, that's not really gonna help me with your application. So we just wanna make sure we're staying on top of those things, okay? Highlight something unique about yourself. I'm gonna read hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of applications, and you're all gonna do sports. You're all gonna do AP classes, you're all gonna do honors classes, but in your essay, it's really your time to shine. Don't tell me about your GPA again, or all of these huge accomplishments that you did in your transcript. I can see it. You don't have to tell me again. I'm gonna be able to see it there. This is your time to tell me something that I'm not gonna be able to see in your transcript, okay? This is your time to shine. I don't know, by looking at me, you wouldn't know that I play 4 different instruments. That's something cool that you could put in your essay, that you like to diversify yourself and your talents. I'm not gonna be able to see that looking at a transcript. So you wanna point these things out to us, because I want to see you as a whole student. We do holistic review. So that doesn't mean, that means that we're gonna look at your transcript, your GPA, but also the rigor of your courses. We're gonna look at your resume, we're gonna look at your essay, and all of the materials you sent to us. Everything we're gonna take in consideration to make our decision. And then be involved, serve others. We love to see students who do volunteer work. I know Montgomery County has SSL hours, but I also like, 75 hours, I think, something like that. But I like to see students that go above and beyond. So even if it was 75, do 100, do 200. There is an award upon graduation where they give you a nice little, what's it called, a tassel upon graduation. I had like 3 tassels on my cap. My principal was mad at me, but I was like, I'm gonna wear my cap. So make sure you do these things, go above and beyond. We wanna see that you not only care about yourself, but you care about your community and the people around you. And then show interest in their school. Some schools want you to show demonstrated interest, and they'll take that into account during the application process. Demonstrated interest means you went for a campus tour, you emailed your counselor, you went to different events on the campus. Towson doesn't do that specifically, but some schools do, so they may want to see all of those different things from you. So you want to think about that when you're looking at your school. All All right, and then your essay, how to stand out. Again, make sure spelling and grammar. That is my #1 tip. Prior to this, we had somebody speak about all these different grammatical spelling tips, errors, all of those things. Make sure you're staying on top of that, okay? Because what I will say is that spelling and grammar is what gets most students. All right, all of our parents graduated at the top of their class, right? Give them your essay and they'll read it for you, okay? Get those spelling tips, get those grammar tips. You want to make sure that you're staying on top of those things, okay? And then letters of recommendation. Some schools accept letters of recommendation. Sometimes I tell people, ask from people who actually like you. I know that sounds crazy, but sometimes we get letters of recommendation from people that don't know the student well, and they just say, this is a good student. That's not going to do anything for your application. You want to ask students, you want to ask people that actually know things about you, that can speak to your character and can speak to how you are as a student, okay? Extracurricular activity resume. Don't put something on there that you did in elementary school. That does not matter to me. You were 6 years old. We want to put stuff on that you're still doing, stuff that you did recently. Maybe in middle school you played soccer. Do you still play soccer? Don't let it be something you did in 6th grade. We want to make sure that we're staying current, who you are as a student now. Some schools offer interviews, and that's dependent on the program that you're in. It could be, music has an interview process, dancing, where they do audition and portfolios as well. So you want to make sure that not only you apply to the university, but you're staying on top of, does this program that I'm applying to require portfolio, an interview, and audition. So these are all things to consider. For example, business is a screen major, so you want to make sure, do I want to go through the screening process? And screening is not to scare you, it just means that you're supposed to take a few different classes, maintain a 3.0 GPA to make sure that you'll actually be successful in the program. We don't want to admit students that we think aren't going to be successful in the program. That's why we have GPA requirements. That's why we have, sometimes some schools ask for test scores. We want to make sure that you're actually going to be successful at the university. We don't want to admit you, and then you don't do well, and now you're stuck with all of this debt. So we want to make sure that you're going to do great things at the university, and that's why we require these screen majors or different requirements. All right, so that concludes my presentation. Here I have some of my information on here if you want to give me a call at my office. If you call me, I might not pick up. I'm sorry, I'm very rarely at my desk these days, but I will definitely get back to you if you leave me a voicemail, shoot me an email. I'm pretty good with email these days. I am not your admissions counselor. Your admissions counselor's name is Adriana Fatso. She might have visited some of your schools already this fall, so you got a chance to speak with her, but she would be the one reading your applications directly. Now, are there any questions I can answer about the college process or about Towson University in general? I know I was talking a lot, I'm sorry. Anybody? Right here. So we do accept dual enrollment credits. So are you taking classes at like MC or something like that? So you would be considered a freshman with advanced credits. So you would not be a transfer student. Transfer students are students that have graduated from high school and then they went on to a community college and then they came back to a four-year institution. You're still in high school going to be taking credits at a university. So what's gonna happen is that I'm gonna look at you as a freshman applicant, and then I'm also going to look at those advanced credits, and that's gonna include the rigor of your classes. You're not taking regular high school courses, you're taking college courses. So that's kind of gonna beef up your application. And then once you've been admitted to the university, you'll find that some of the classes that your friends are taking, you're not going to have to take anymore because you took them at the community college. So we take credits from every accredited institution in the United States, basically. So I wouldn't worry too much about classes that are going to transfer, okay? Anybody else?
All right, this is your time to ask your questions for Townsend. We have a gentleman over here, or young lady. I saw someone raise their hand over there. Okay, go ahead. Gotta put them on Facebook.
Yeah, I actually would like to hear more about your holistic review process.
Okay.
If I have to give you an example, I'm a junior, my GPA is 2.5, so how much weight are you giving to my essay and to to my recommendations, and what are you expecting from my essay? That's number one. The second question is, I'm a senior, I got accepted to UMD, UMBC, and Towson. Why should I choose Towson?
Oh, great questions. Okay, I will start with the holistic review. So what I will say is that the profile for the university is a weighted 3.72. Our average SAT score is about 1130, and the average ACT is a 23. Now those are just our middle 50% range. We also admit students with below that as well as above that, okay? And we only look at weighted. So we don't care about your unweighted GPA, we're only going to be looking at weighted. So schools we have, when you're looking at colleges, you'll find that you have some schools that are reach schools, you'll have some schools that are target schools, and schools that are safeties. So a safety for somebody applying to Towson would be somebody who has maybe like a weighted 3.5 GPA. You're in that range. You should feel comfortable applying to the university and feeling comfortable that you'll be admitted. Maybe a student that has, I don't know, a 4.2 weighted and they apply to Towson. That's a school, that's a safety. You know you're gonna get in with your transcript. But with a student with a 2.5, it's gonna be a little more difficult, okay? So it doesn't mean that you're counted out of the review process. But what does mean is that I will say transcripts do hold a lot of weight in the application process. But I'm also going to be looking in your essay for you to detail things, extenuating circumstances. Maybe you had a difficult home life. Maybe something prevented you from doing your best in school. Explain to me why your GPA is the way it is. There is a section on the Common App, Towson is on the Common App, where you can detail how COVID-19 affected you in terms of your academics. So we're gonna look at that and take that in consideration. We're looking at the transcript. And then letters of recommendation and other supplemental documents. We are test optional, so we do not require your test scores, but we will also look at those things to try and beef up your application. The goal is that we want to admit you to the university. So we're gonna look and pull from every different thing to try and get you in there. It also depends on our applicant pool, how strong our university, the students that applied to the university. So if this year we just have a crazy amount of students that applied with weighted 4.0s, it's gonna be a little bit difficult to get into the university. But I always encourage people to apply because you never know what could happen. So that's what I would say for holistic review. And then let's say that you got into a whole bunch of other schools. For example, I applied to 6 schools, Towson was a part of my list, and I was trying to figure out where am I gonna go to school. So number one for me was cost, okay? I was trying to figure out how much does this school cost. So sometimes you'll find that an out-of-state school will be equivalent to the cost of an in-state school just by the scholarships and grants that that school gives you. So you may find that going to school in Pennsylvania may actually be cheaper than going to school in-state at Towson. You want to think about that. How much debt am I going to graduate and how much do you feel comfortable graduating with? You also want to think about the programs that they offer. So let's say that you are really interested in teaching. We're a teaching college. That's a program that we do very, very well, okay? But maybe you're thinking about another school, you want to go to teaching, but they don't do teaching as well as us. You want to think about these things when you're looking at your schools. You want to think about the type of demographic you want to be around. So maybe a PWI isn't okay for you. That's absolutely fine. I want you to go where you feel comfortable. Maybe you feel more comfortable at an HBCU, at Morgan State, or maybe you want to go to, I don't know, Hampton University. There's a range of different schools that will offer the type of demographic you're looking for and the type of other students that you're looking for that look like you or just like you. Again, I wouldn't count us out. Our demographics have really grown over years and we plan to continue to expand on campus. But maybe Towson just isn't the right fit for you there. And then maybe you want to think about location. How far is this school away from me? Do you want to be away from your parents? Some of you are thinking yes in your heads, and that's okay. But some of you may want to be very close by to your family. Those are things that you want to take into consideration. But also, like I said, going on tour really helps to pick that college. I visit a lot of different schools, and sometimes you may look at a residence hall and say, I absolutely cannot live here. Or maybe you'll meet some people on campus and you say, I don't like the energy that this school has. You want to take all factors in consideration and pick what's best for you, not necessarily what's good for the people around you, but what's good for you. This is the beginning of you becoming a young adult, and you need to start making decisions for yourself, and you want to make sure that you're content with the decisions that you're making. Okay? I hope that answered your question. Perfect. Okay. I think that concludes my, oh, do we have another one? Oh, right here. When thinking about double majoring? So, like I said, we are major blind. So when we're looking at you applying, your major has nothing to do with our review process. We don't care if you come in with nursing, art, if you come in with basket weaving, anything that you want to do. It's really up to you upon graduation. Double majoring is very difficult. Pulling yourself in two different directions, you'll find, political science was fun, but economics was hard. And when you're writing, a 15-page paper, and then they also have you doing calculus over here, it's very difficult. You want to think about, am I willing to take the extra course load? Am I willing to take classes over the summer, over winter break to, get out of school in 4 years? And again, college is not a race, it's a marathon. So you don't have to finish in 4 years. You can take 5 years, you can take 6 years. A lot of students actually typically take 6 years to graduate. It's not uncommon. So you basically want to take as much time as you need, and you want to think about if you're prepared for that rigor of classes. Okay. All right, again, all of my information is going to be on the website, so if you ever want to call me, email me, you can reach me, and we can talk about Towson, okay? All right, awesome.
Thank you. Great job. All right, thank you all. Let's give it one more time for Acevedo Longe. Wonderful explanation, missions. If you have any questions for her afterwards, you can contact her. This is a great time since this is, as an admissions counselor, she can give you kind of the ones and twos further on getting into a college the right way. So that wraps up EriStars event today. Do we have anyone that would like to speak amongst the EriStars staff that would like to speak? Okay. All right. Let's give it up for Helen, one of the stars of the show. She set up the event with the EriStars team.
I don't think I need a microphone. I just wanted to thank you all for coming and being patient with us today. Our board for supporting me and your patience, and the family and friends that came by to support. So I hope this was helpful, and our information is going to be online for you guys to pull the slides. Thank you, guys.
All right. That wraps it up. So.